hello again, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. I'm, of course, as always, Ray Russell, and this week, it's been a while, but it's time to dip back into Georgia Championship Wrestling circa 1981. And in order to do that, it's time to bring back on Mr. Georgia himself, by way of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here he is, the one and only Mr. Jammie Ward. Welcome back, Jammie.
Kind of like Joe Hendry. You called my name, and I'm here.
You are here. It's been a while, Jammie Ward, but you are back here on Regional Rasslin. Nobody more happier than I to hear from you. So it's going to be a good time here today as we end the month of October. We move into the month of November, and we're going to see the debut, we've already teased it, of one Roddy Piper heading to the Georgia territory before this episode ends.
This is the best part of Georgia Championship Wrestling. From now up, what's he leave, around August of 82? This is the highlight for me, starting now.
No shocker. And some other talent here, too, that we'll get into later on. That they're popping back up left and right now. It's really a peak time in the Georgia territory. And if you guys think I'm bullshitting you just to get you to listen, stay tuned. We'll listen to all the names involved in the upcoming episodes of TV. But right now, Jammie, we're off to Piedmont, Alabama, and the old Piedmont football field. I've been there a time or two. Not really, but maybe Gene Jackson has. October 24th, I don't have results, but I do know the main event featured Terry Gordy taking on Michael Hayes in some variation. Don't know the stipulation of the matchup. Maybe baby bottle, maybe no DQ, who knows, but they were out there on the football field.
And right there, two more big names that are still with us.
Terry Gordy?
Terry Gordy's a big name. And Michael Hayes. Well, Michael Hayes is the ultimate.
Oh, I thought you meant
name.
Still with us in alive. Sorry about that.
No, I meant still with us in Georgia Championship Wrestling 1981.
Yeah, we're going to see how much longer they're utilized, at least utilized properly, as the weeks continue on here in the year of 1981. But we move on also October 24th in Chattanooga at the old Memorial Auditorium. Ted Oates over the French Angel. Iron Mike Sharp defeating Jerry Oates. Mixed tag team action. The big guys and the little guys. As Reeser Bowden once said, it's Steve-O and Cowboy Lang defeating Professor Sonoda and Little Tokyo. Well, that makes sense for a team. Big Jim Duggan over Brian Blair. Biggest win to date, I think, for Duggan here in the territory, at least in singles. And Wildfire Tommy Rich defeating the crippler Ray Stevens. Stevens not able to cash in on that bounty.
Yeah, very interesting matchup there. Yeah, Stevens was going for that bounty. And if I remember right, on the TBS show that we covered last time, Stevens spoke of this match and how he was going to collect a bounty, but evidently came up short.
Came up short this time around anyway, as we roll on to Columbus, Ohio, the Ohio Center, October 25th. Brian St. John over Steve Bolus. Cowboy Lang defeating Little Tokyo in a midget match. Mr. Wrestling 2 over Big Jim Duggan. Got to wonder if he hit that knee lift off the middle rope again. Still thinking about that one all these months later. Tag team action. Going to see Steve-O and Brian Blair team up. Seems like a formidable team. Over Ray Stevens and Tor Kamada? By DQ, guys. Michael Hayes over Terry Gordy in yet another baby bottle match. And the NWA World Champion, Ric Flair, coming to town in Columbus, going to a 60-minute time limit draw with Wildfire Tommy Rich.
That's kind of surprising to see Rich go 60 minutes. He wasn't exactly known as a 60-minute man like Flair was at this point.
No, Tommy was young, though, and I guess, at the very least, he had the beer sweats out of him. I'm sure he put it right back in after the matchup, but that'd be a fun night there. Former world champion Tommy Rich established in the territory, no doubt about it, and he's in there with the new, first time, Ric Flair as the world champion here, battling to that 60-minute draw. It may be, and I hate to say this, because we got Hayes and Gordy and Flair, the world champion in town, taking on Tommy Rich, but this may be one of the weaker cards they brought to Columbus in the past year, because they were loading them up front, as you remember, as they got started in Columbus. But once it became a common town for them to venture to once a month, it seems like the last few have been, I don't want to say ho-hum, because these are still some really fun matches. But at the same time, gone away are the talent from out of town they were bringing in. The Andres, the Dusties, even Ole and Gene, when they were just working Mid-Atlantic, would come up and do Columbus.
And let's not forget the Cowboy himself.
That's right.
Came in from American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
The Cowboy and the American Dream, baby. Oh, we go on. West Virginia, also October 25th. They would do the Memorial Fieldhouse later in the evening, heading back down towards Georgia. It was Steve-O going to a draw with Brian St. John. Terry Gordy defeating Brian Blair. Wildfire Tommy Rich over Tor Kamada. It's Cowboy Lang again defeating Little Tokyo. World champion Ric Flair scoring a win over Mr. Wrestling 2. There's that match. You know, Mr. Wrestling 2 doing a job, even to the world champion, doesn't sit well with Grumpy Grandpa. So they're going to throw him a bone, give Mr. Wrestling 2 a win in a 10-man battle royal.
Do you think he won the battle royal first to get the title shot?
It's very likely. I'm just reading them in the order in which I found them.
Oh, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying, to me, that seems the logical explanation.
Here's the bigger question. Were Cowboy Lang and Little Tokyo in the battle royal?
I doubt it, but that would have been really cool if they were.
That would have been fun. That would have been fun. Well, I'm looking at the card, 10-man battle royal, and I only see 6 big guys on the card outside of Wrestling 2. Ric Flair, obviously, if it was for a shot at the world champion, which would have been a fun little journey for the night, Flair wouldn't have been part of the battle royal. I don't know if Flair would have been part of it either way, but, you know, you never really know. But anywho, it's a fun little night. We saw them kind of build towards this, maybe not for Huntington, but we've seen him in the past, Wrestling 2 getting that title shot with Flair. That's when he started working in that cross arm breaker move. So I'm sure it was a fun night in Huntington.
And the fans never go home disappointed in Huntington, West Virginia.
No, because it's the only show in town. So whatever you bring, they're welcoming it. As we roll on October 26th, Augusta, Georgia, the old Bell Auditorium. Brian Blair defeating the French Angel. Steve-O going to a draw with Brian St. John. It's Wrestling 2 over Jim Duggan once more. George Wells still here for a short period, scoring a win? That can't be right. George Wells over Ray Stevens? I don't know. Wildfire Tommy Rich defeating Tor Kamada, and in the main event, it's Terry Gordy over Michael Hayes in a lumberjack match.
George Wells must have won by DQ. There's no way Ole put him over clean over Ray Stevens. Unless Stevens was just being a nice guy that night.
That was my curiosity there. Was it Ray Stevens saying, you go over, whatever the case may be there? Because I just don't see it otherwise. It doesn't make any sense in the storylines. Ray Stevens chasing Tommy Rich, going to work Dick Slater at the Omni show. But here in this show, he's doing a job to George Wells, who's on his way out. I don't know.
I've heard of Harley Race doing that from time to time. Not necessarily when he was champion.
Oh, I've heard of Harley Race doing it when he was champion for the right money.
Well, yeah, ask Giant Baba.
A couple times over. Oh, man. Let's see. We've got some dates here. I don't have matches. October 27th in Center, Alabama, the high school gym, and Winder, Georgia, National Guard Armory, October 29th. October 30th in Gainesville at the Georgia Mountain Center. No results for any of those. I do have, going back to October 28th, Columbus, Georgia, Memorial Auditorium. We've got some results there, including Steve-O over Rick Ferreira, who's still here apparently. George Wells over the French Angel. Wrestling 2 teaming with Brian Blair, defeating Jim Duggan and Tor Kamada by DQ. It's Michael Hayes over Terry Gordy in another baby bottle match. And Wildfire Tommy Rich again defeating Ray the Crippler Stevens in Columbus, Georgia.
And we might not be getting to see any of that on television between Hayes and Gordy with the baby bottle stuff, but at least it's going around the circuit.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least it's making the rounds. I wish it was just a few years later that they did this, because somebody might have had just a little footage of this. Even Georgia might have saved a little footage of this if we could have done it a little later than 1981. But who knows? These Omni cards still pop up from time to time. So it's just wishful thinking. I've been waiting to see it, and I hate this era where Ole is taking back over the book, because he is not giving us any footage from the Omni at this point in time, and I'm not really sure why.
I have no idea either.
Well, we move on. Trick or treat time, guys. Halloween, October 31st, 1981. It's time to head back to WTBS Studios for more Georgia Championship Wrestling. away we go. Halloween, happy Halloween, Jamie. October 31st, Atlanta, GA, right here on the Superstation, Channel 17 WTBS, hosted by the one and only Gordon Solie in the Sports Arena, or AKA TBS Studios. But Gordon not alone this week. Jamie, why don't you tell everyone who's standing there beside him?
Well, we start with a camera shot of Gordon by himself, and then he says how he has a special guest joining him this week for color commentary, the one and the only Roddy Piper.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us. Before I get underway with bringing you a rundown of all of the matches that we're going to be seeing during the next hour, I'd like to introduce a gentleman who has an outstanding record in professional wrestling, former United States heavyweight champion, a former world lightweight champion. He is from Glasgow, Scotland, and he'll be lending his expertise and comments to the program today as our guest color commentator. Let me introduce at this time Roddy Piper. Roddy, welcome aboard.
Why, thank you very much, and it is a pleasure to be here. You know, they asked me to come to be the guest commentator, and being the former United States heavyweight champion, I do know what I'm talking about, and it's going to be my pleasure to watch some of these fine wrestlers here. You know, if they had a boxing match, they would ask Muhammad Ali to come here, and they have a wrestling match, and they've asked myself to come here with a wonderful announcer such as yourself, so it's truly going to be a pleasure, Mr. Solie.
Well, thank you so very much, Roddy. As I tell you, we're going to see Wrestling 2 and Steve-O in action. We'll also be seeing Austin Idol returning to action. Stan the Man Hansen from Borger, Texas. The Super Destroyer, who a lot of people seem to feel right now as a superstar. More about that upcoming right now. Let's go to the ring to our first match, and Roddy and I will be bringing you some comments on this first match.
Well, not Rod Piper yet. He's still Roddy Piper at this point.
You caught that too. So the Hot Rod has arrived. He says, if this were boxing, you'd bring in Muhammad Ali. But this is wrestling, so they've invited Roddy Piper to add some insight. I bet you love the line.
Oh, absolutely. And what everyone needs to remember, that moment right there changed the whole course of professional wrestling going forward. Roddy was the original heel commentator. And as we get into this, you know, Roddy isn't an over-the-top heel.
No.
He's a very calm, talks very slowly. He points out deficiencies in both heels and faces. I mean, you could definitely tell, if you had no idea who he was, you could tell that he was a bad guy commentator. But at this point, he still wasn't over the top where he just picks on
the baby faces.
All the baby faces, right?
Yeah, no,
and because of this, we wind up, down the line getting Jesse Ventura, who takes it and kind of into a different direction.
He absolutely does, and Jesse was amazing in his spot. So was Bobby Heenan, for that matter. But Roddy Piper truly did begin it all as far as heel color commentary goes, and it starts right here in my favorite part, as you pointed out, and we're going to talk about it time and time again as we go through this episode. But Roddy doesn't go full-on heel. He's not there just bashing baby faces because they're good guys. He lends credibility as to why. He gives observations, and we're going to talk about those observations here as we roll along, as we go to the ring, tag team action, as we see the mostly regular team of Mr. Wrestling 2 and Steve-O taking on Mean Mike Miller and Tony Russo. Quite a heel preliminary team here. Russo, very capable, and Mike Miller, well, he had quite a stint in the Portland territory on top, so these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't think he was in Portland yet at this point.
Nope.
But you could definitely tell that he had something, and Russo, we always knew Tony Russo had something. It's just a shame he just never really got the proper push. He could have probably really gotten over in a place like Tri-States or even Central States or the old Arizona promotion back in the day.
Yeah, he could have definitely been utilized much better in a territory that didn't have all of the gigantic names that we see here in Georgia. But Russo, a capable hand, as Roddy Piper right out of the gate, making a variety of observations here throughout the matchup, from the different styles on the heel side, the big man of rugged Mike Miller and the more stout grappler-esque Tony Russo. Roddy also pointing out that the baby faces, they could be doing a little better in there, Jamie. And you might say, well, that's a heelish thing to say. And yeah, Piper uses his critique to put the good guys down, but he does it in an analytical way, and that's what I loved about it.
Yeah, it was very constructive criticism on Roddy Piper's part.
Now, to be fair, Piper also points out what he likes about the babyface team here. The quick tagging, staying on top of the opponents, as we see a flying head scissors by Steve-O. So, of course, we have to see a flying head scissors by Wrestling 2 as well. Never going to be outdone by his partner. I wish Wrestling 2 had teamed with Too Cold Scorpio. Would have loved to have seen him go up there and try to perform that 450.
Oh, Ray, you just made me hurt my ribs.
Well, big, mean Mike Miller finally takes over on Steve-O here. Russo even getting his shots in, too. Finally, Steve able to free himself and tag in Wrestling 2, who runs mild for a moment here, taking over on the heels, but a tag back to Steve-O, who unleashes a double thrust chop to Tony Russo, and then a back leg round kick on Miller. Shout out to Eric Bischoff for that one. And then a jumping karate kick. That's a My Toby Gary for anybody asking out there. The old Karate Kid style pump kick. It's going to get the win here on Russo. Steve-O going over 7 minutes and 21 seconds. Dare I say he did the Karate Kid crane kick before the Karate Kid?
Just thinking about it, it just popped in my head at this time. Steve-O was the Ricky Steamboat before Ricky Steamboat.
Oh my God. What a terrible take.
If Fate hadn't
you mean the WWF version?
He could have been the Steven the Dragon Olsenowski.
Oh, no.
Instead of a ninja.
No, sir. We will not have that here on Regional Rasslin. Send your hate mail to Jammie Ward, guys. As we go up next, it is the returning Stan the Lariat Hansen, Stan the Man Hansen, back in Georgia, taking on Ed Timms. And Tim's going to make a huge mistake here as he charges at Hansen to begin. And as you guys might all imagine, he gets his ass handed to him for his troubles. Stan just eats Tim's up here. Nasty back elbow straight to the jaw. And then the Lariato. Going to end this one just 2 minutes time. Stan Hansen, good to see the bad man from Borger.
And you know what's great, Ray? You know, you and I were, both of us were at CWF Legends Fan Fest back in April. And Stan admitted he couldn't see anything in a ring. He's mostly blind without his glasses.
I think Stan said that forever, but it's pretty obvious, I think, from the years. Oh, my God, those poor guys in Japan especially. But no different here. He was still blind in 1981. That elbow into Tim's mush. I mean, Stan didn't necessarily intentionally try to hurt people, but damn, it's just fun watching him wrestle.
Yeah, I love Stan Hansen. He's another one of my all-time favorites.
As we go on now, up next, a promo from the Mac and Dream, Dusty Rhodes, the former world champion. Man, I wish Roddy Piper would have interviewed Dusty. Now, that could have been a fun time here, but everybody put their pants on one leg at a time, says the American Dream. That includes the Nature Boy. Dusty has a return match with Ric Flair upcoming at the Omni. He says Flair ain't no better than the Mac and Dream, and Dusty wants the ladies to know he also takes his pants off one leg at a time as well.
Well, you know, like Dusty once said, he might not be Space Mountain, but he's the whole park.
Oh, man, he may have the longest line over there at Space Mountain, but Dusty, oh, man, the Mac and Dream, he takes his pants off the same way he puts them on, baby, one leg at a time, as we get a rundown of the upcoming Omni card with Freddie Miller, and then out comes the NWA World Champion himself, Nature Boy Ric Flair, as he says Dusty is second rate, the son of a plumber. Which brings out the American Dream. Dusty Rhodes going to interrupt the Flair promo as the Nature Boy compares his clothes to the Dream's. Dusty's response? A slap to the face of the Nature Boy. And Dusty calmly walking off as Flair goes irate, as only the Nature Boy can.
2 times World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion Dusty Rhodes, a man who's looking to regain that championship.
Because so I just be coming out, you know, Judge Tulip just at the airport done told me, he say, Dream, you put his lights out. He say, you put his lights out for the 1, 2, 3. He say, don't get too excited. You know, he say, up out here at the cash stand, we put our pants on one leg at a time. He say, the baker puts his pants on one leg at a time. He say, the construction worker put his pants on one leg at a time. And I know that you put your pants on one leg at a time. So we all equal what he's saying. So Ric Flair gonna get more of it than he can handle. Cause I put my pants on one leg at a time, and you know, darling, I take them off the same way. Ric Flair, I'm gonna jump on him so bad, it's gonna hurt his mama to watch him beat.
There you have it, the comments from 2-time world heavyweight champion going back after that title tomorrow night in the Omni here in Atlanta. And now here's a total rundown.
Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, the Omni in Atlanta. Such stars as Terry Gordy, Big Red, Michael Hayes, Brian Blair, plus these matches for the World's Heavyweight Championship. No disqualification, 2 referees. Ric Flair, champion, against Dusty Rhodes. Special challenge tag team event. Tor Kamada and the Super Destroyer against Wildfire Tommy Rich and Stan Hansen. Mr. Excitement Dick Slater against Ray Stevens. Steve-O against the Great Kabuki. Austin Idol against Wrestling 2 tomorrow night.
All right, with me right now is the current NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Ric Flair. All of the marbles on the line tomorrow night. 2 referees, no disqualification.
Dusty Rhodes standing out here admitting to the whole world that he's a second-class bum, dressed like that, blue jeans, a T-shirt, and trying to tell us that he's in a class of the world champion. No way. Rhodes, you are the son of a plumber. You are second-rate. And you've got a mile to go, brother. Now, wait a minute, Solie. He doesn't belong out here in my time. Look at him. Cowboy boots, jeans, a sweatshirt. I ain't putting nothing down. All I know is that a man is not judged by the clothes that he wears.
Is that right? Well, you remember one thing needs clothes. Top the dream, Daddy.
How about that?
Whoa, wait just a second. Meltzer, settle that tomorrow night at the Omni.
Come here, Lord. Get up back here.
And that'll take us into a commercial break. Fun little setup there for the rematch.
And let us not forget, for those that are watching, that Gordon takes charge and says, we're going to have none of that right now. Let's go to commercial break. Gordon takes charge again.
Save it, fellas. Save it for the ring. As we head into commercial, we come back to find, oh my God, it is indeed the universal heartthrob. Austin Idol, darlin, is back. And he's back in action, taking on Rick Thor. As on commentary, Gordon Solie pushing an altercation that is going on right now backstage. Apparently, Tommy Rich trying to get at the Super Destroyer in the dressing room. Rich still believes that Super D is the superstar. Though I don't understand what unmasking him would prove, Jamie, since Tommy doesn't know what either man looks like.
That's a great analogy, Ray.
Well,
he really does have no idea. I'm going to rip Tommy Rich now. Here we go.
Okay.
How can he think they're the same person? Go cut some pictures out of magazines. It's obvious they're not the same person.
Well,
not like he doesn't have access to the magazines. Bill Apter's there every other week taking pictures of them.
Bill, can you confirm, Bill Apter, that these are 2 separate men? Well, we haven't seen them in the same place at the same time yet. And even then, as Doink would say, it's all an illusion. So we'll wait and see what comes of all of this mess. But Tommy Rich swearing he believes Super D is superstar and he wants to get to him in the dressing room. So we hear that's going on. And that played, as a young fan, that played a lot into wrestling for me because my imagination was spinning. I saw Tommy Rich being, held back from trying to attack the Super D in the locker room. So I love when they threw those nuggets out there because back then we didn't have that extra camera backstage showing the altercation and things. We had to pretend or imagine what was happening.
Right, exactly. But one thing I wanted to add back to the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Young 15-year-old Jammie Ward may have thought about going out to go trick-or-treating that night until he saw Roddy Piper at 6:05.
There you go. I love it. Yeah, well, that totally makes sense to me. Well,
and I can still remember watching this show that night.
Well, I love that all of that, still sticks in your head. It's like the memories I have from, my childhood and the things the early stuff that I watched. And just everything stuck to me to the point where I could recite promos that I only heard, one time to some degree. And I didn't hear again for 10 years. And I go, yeah, he really did say that. So if I had me wondering all those years, did I dream up that promo? And then I hear it again. I go, oh my God, no, wow, I can't believe I remember this or I remember that. And it's great that you have these memories still fresh in your mind all these years later. And I'm sure this is bringing back a lot of great times as we have Austin Idol in the ring. So that's another great time as on commentary, Gordon out there putting over Austin Idol, but also talking about that confrontation that's supposedly going on in the locker room. As we get about a minute into the action, if you will, Idol finally going to remove his robe, and finally we begin the actual wrestling here. As Austin, he has his way with Thor, no shocker, pitching him outside so Idol can pose for the fans, darlin. Even though he's a heel, the ladies, they love it anyway. Then back inside, it's a middle rope elbow drop from Idol, followed by the Las Vegas leg lock, which is the figure 4. And Idol picks up the win 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I wrote, wonder if that figure 4 was applied from the correct side, Jamie.
Very interesting. I'll have to take notice. But one of our loyal listeners, Mark Rowland,
yes,
had sent me a message knowing that we were going to get into Austin Idol on this show. And what he would have loved to have seen at this point was a quick Austin Idol Ric Flair feud, complete with the battling figure 4s. And then maybe we could have found out what side was the proper side.
Good call, and I'm glad you brought up one of our loyal listeners here, because it gives me a great time to bring up another of our listeners and a great super fan backer of the WrestleCopia brand. I'm talking about Benji Sebastian, Benji Fido, call him what you will, and of course, the great Antonio, but not that great Antonio, not the wrestler, but his son Antonio. So I wanted to give him a shout out because love them both, and I've been talking to him on Facebook recently, and I told him, I said, I'm going to give you guys a shout out, and I'm glad you reminded me by mentioning one of our other listeners. So shout out to Benji, and of course, a bigger shout out to the greatest mac and cheese fan of all time, Antonio.
Absolutely. I have his picture on my mantle.
I love it.
The picture of Benji and of Antonio and I.
Well, that's good
one,
time.
One of my highlights. And Benji is a nationally renowned disc jockey.
He sure is.
The wonderful state of New York.
The wonderful state of New York.
Not the city isn't wonderful. Yes, people. I hate the Mets. And the Yankees. And the Rangers.
You better not say anything about the Indians. Guardians. Sorry. Anywho,
I love the Tribe.
We are talking wrestling for you baseball fans out there. You might appreciate that. For those of you who are only here for the wrestling, we'll get back on track because we got a lot to get into. Right now, it's another one of Jamie's favorites. We're going to go off to Gordon Solie talking to Michael Hayes.
Wasted no time whatsoever. Well, there you hear it. The music of the fabulous Freebird, the original Freebird, Michael Hayes.
That's Michael P.S. Hayes, and the P.S. stands for purely sexy.
Sexy? This man, he's talking about sexy, Dollar. You look up the word sexy in Webster's Dictionary, Jackson, and you'll see a picture of Austin Idol beside it. This is my interview. I'm the man who made Atlanta, Georgia what it is today. Check the record books. Everything will tell you right now, Dollar. Austin Idol, I don't mean it. I beat them all, Jackson, and I'm the man who got things cooking here in Georgia, Jack.
Well, he's certainly not lacking in self-confidence and self-esteem, Mr. Hayes.
Hey, look. You let me tell you, Ole Anderson or any other jerk around here,
that he may have thought he got Hotlanta cooking, but Hotlanta is now cooking on Fantasia, brother, and Fantasia lives on, and it's here to stay. Now you can bank that.
Thank you so very much, Michael Hayes, and we'll be back.
Well, there it is. Michael Hayes interrupted by Austin Idol following the Idol matchup. We hear Freebird hit there, and out comes Mr. P.S., of course, that P.S. standing for purely sexy. As Austin Idol walks over, he says, "You want to talk about sexy, darlin'?" Webster's Dictionary, a lot of people don't even know what that is anymore. He says there's a picture of Austin Idol beside the word sexy. So how about that? Idol then made Georgia what it is today, so he says. As he poses in front of Michael Hayes, I wrote, LOL. You can't ham it up any more than that. Michael Hayes cutting a promo, Austin Idol standing directly in front of him, posing into the camera. As Hayes says, Hotlanta is now cooking on Fantasia. Austin Idol doesn't play up to any of it, just walks off calmly.
And you know what's missing here?
Interaction?
Well, let's interaction, and let's rip Ole Anderson a little bit.
Okay.
I know bookers don't like to necessarily use ideas from other bookers, but how can you totally ignore what happened a year before with the Idol Freebird?
Yes. Yeah, the 4 flat tires.
How can you totally blow it off, especially when Ole was here at that point?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the end of Ole's time there before Robert Fuller came in and kind of just dropped the whole thing, which was, crazy in itself. But yeah, not to, go too far off topic, but you're right. And I thought about the same thing. I'm seeing Austin Idol and Michael Hayes in the same screen at the same time. And the last time we saw that, it was the 4 flat tires promo where the Freebirds basically screwed Idol out of arriving in time for Kevin Sullivan and Idol to get that tag title shot with the Birds on TV.
Right, and then even, spoiler alert, even when Idol and Gordy get together here, there's not a lot of mention about Idol having prior relationship with.
No mention.
The
only thing I can come up with there is Idol's the heel. So if he mentions things that Michael Hayes did to him, that's sympathy on the heel, I guess, or at least retribution rather than just being an asshole like Austin Idol is here.
But why is Idol even just walking in as a heel? Even when he was here for that one match, was it back in May or early June? He was a face for that match. Why are we just walking Idol back in as a heel? Should have turned him heel.
I think he's always the opposite of whatever Michael Hayes is. You can't have both those guys on the same side. I don't think. I could be wrong, but I don't know.
I mean, there is a lot of similarity between the two of them. Absolutely. And I guess they can't be on the same side, but still, could you have it like a heel turn or something? Have them just come right out and say, listen, I hate your guts from a year ago. You're snowballing these people. Something along those lines.
I would totally see that. But what's really weird, and we're going to see another interaction, if you want to call it that, between these two guys later. What's really odd about these promos are they're both in the same screen at the same time. Austin Idol is doing shitty things to kind of ham it up and take over the interview by standing in front of Michael Hayes and posing for the camera. And while Hayes kind of addresses, hey, it's running on Fantasia now, it's no longer Austin Idol, they're not really having conversation. Idol's not responding, as if Hayes isn't even there. And it's a weird dynamic, but at the same time, at least it's different.
Yeah, definitely different. And I have in my notes here, I believe this is the first time Michael Hayes calls himself purely sexy.
Really? I'm going to have to do a little digging. I guess I just call him that for so long that I didn't notice. I mean, I know Terry wasn't Bam Bam yet, but I didn't realize Michael Hayes wasn't already purely sexy by this point. Can't believe I'm saying this.
He may have been calling himself that, but this is the first time he ever used PS purely sexy.
Okay.
Back to back.
Gotcha. Yeah. It took me a long time to figure out what PS stood for because they didn't say it too often on TV. Finally, when they did, I had the aha moment. I think it was Jim Ross that said it one time, and I go, oh, okay, that makes sense back in the 80s. So we'll have more from Michael Hayes later on and Austin Idol. Believe me, guys. We go off now to another interview, this time with manager Gary Hart, who says there's a completely different style. He wants everyone to know there are two different styles between American karate and Oriental Gung Fu, comparing it to the likes of the Dallas Cowboys versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of 1981. He says, sorry, Gordon. Of course, Dallas riding high and Tampa Bay Bucks. Well, Gordon from from Florida. So it was kind of a jab there. But Solie, not to be outdone, jabs Hart right back. He says, well, the Chicago Bears haven't looked too good either this season. Brother, Gordon Solie not going to let it go. I love that these guys are ribbing each other on screen.
That's exactly what that was. That was definitely a rib, because I'm surprised to hear that. I missed it the first time around 40-some years ago. But this time, knowing that Hart was from Chicago, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So they have a little out-of-character fun there on TV, but then we cut to a replay of the old Steve-O karate video. Gary Hart not impressed with that. Steve-O kicking a bag, because the bag, it don't kick back. Chopping a block, well, the block doesn't fight back. American karate, the form, Gary Hart says the form is pretty, but Kabuki's Gung Fu is deadly. Steve-O not in the same class as the Great Kabuki. I wrote one of Gary Hart's better promos in this run, for me anyway.
I think my dad actually woke me up after this interview was over.
Oh, is that what happened? I didn't mind it. I thought of anything he's done thus far, this was the best of it.
It probably was, but I said it before, Gary Hart bored me.
Well, I totally get it. I have my guys like that as well. We hear
even
from
in world class.
Yeah, well, that's another story. I mean, it's just a different dynamic with Gary. He was all over the screen because he was booking at that point. Well, we hear from another manager right after Gary. We hear from the great Mephisto, who says tomorrow night it's going to be Tor Kamada and the Super Destroyer taking on Tommy Rich and Stan Hansen. And then they discuss if Super D is Superstar. But Mephisto says that's just ridiculous, Jamie. Mephisto promises he will collect the bounty $12,000 on the head of Tommy Rich with the help of Super D, Tor Kamada, and maybe Ray Stevens.
Well, at least we know it's $12,000 now, because it did start out 10, 11, 12, 13,000.
It was all over.
It was all over the place in that briefcase.
I think at one point Superstar said there might be more money in here. He didn't even know how much he was paying people. So it's a very, very odd thing. They couldn't come up with a number, just stick with the, one specific figure. It had been all over the place, but apparently it's 12 grand, 12 large. And so we hear from a couple of managers. Now we go off to a wrestler. We're actually going to listen to this one as in comes Stan Hansen.
The man Hansen has joined me. I was hoping that Tommy Rich would be with you.
Well, I wish Tommy was out here, but they got him almost hog-tied back there because he thinks that's either the Superstar or the Super Destroyer. But tomorrow night, let me tell everybody in Atlanta, it's butt-kicking time. It's time to get people to get excited and get out to the Omni because me and Tommy Rich, the former Georgia Tag Team Champions, are coming to the Omni tomorrow night. And we're going to go after Mephisto and his blood-curdling crew. I don't care who they are. But let me tell you something, Mephisto. Tommy Rich, he wants that Superstar. He wants Super Destroyer. He wants Tora Kamada. It doesn't matter. And he called the biggest, nastiest dog of them all, Stan Hansen from Borger, Texas. Tomorrow night in the Omni, Jack. Tomorrow night in the Omni. Not since the mayor election is going to be so much excitement in the Omni in Atlanta Sunday night, Jack. Tommy Rich and me, you get ready, Mephisto, because dogs are going to be biting on some legs tomorrow night, Omni.
So Stan says Tommy Rich was to join him out here, but Rich is about hogtied in the back right now, Jamie, because he's trying to get at Super D still all these many minutes later. So the former Georgia Tag Team Champions, Tommy Rich and Stan Hansen, coming for Mephisto's boys tomorrow night. I wrote, is it possible to say Omni more times than Stan did in this single promo? Hard sell there by the Lariat. At least we know where the match is going to be. He had to say Omni at least like 15 times.
He just wanted to make sure you didn't go to the wrong place.
I think every sentence ended in the Omni, but who am I to doubt Stan Hansen as we roll on back to the ring to see the guy they've been talking about, Super Destroyer, managed by the great Mephisto, Super D's opponent, Don Gilbert here. And just to be clear, guys, this is definitely not the Masked Superstar. It is not Bill Eadie, but rather Scott Irwin under the hood here, as Roddy Piper, still on commentary, in full promo mode in this one, actually talking more than Gordon Solie for this matchup. That is until Steve-O going to join commentary about 3 minutes in, and that's going to get some heat. From me anyway, Steve-O replacing Roddy Piper.
Well, look how far Steve-O's come. He's been here a year now, and he's bumping out Roddy Piper. That shows you the clout Steve-O has.
Well, it shows me something. At least he does it for a reason here. Steve-O briefly talking his karate training before he goes into the whole Tommy Rich being irate in the dressing room scenario. O also says if anyone knows Superstar, it's Steve. Remember, Steve lost the national title to the Masked Superstar. Steve-O then, he has an idea. Hey, first time for everything, Jamie. Steve-O with an idea for once as he leaves Gordon Solie and moves closer to the ring. And if you guys stay quiet and listen carefully, we can barely hear Steve shout, "Hey, Superstar!" And like a cartoon, the masked man stops what he's doing in the ring and turns around to address Steve-O, only to realize, oh shit, my cover is blown. Super D answered to Superstar. Gordon explaining the inadvertent reflex to turn around when your name is called.
Yeah, and this takes me back to that night. I'm watching this with my mom, and my mom popped. She said, I knew it was Superstar. And it has stayed in my mind all these years later. And then, of course, I had to break it to my mom. No, they are two different people. I've seen this guy on the Florida wrestling that I watch in the afternoon. So she was quite disappointed when I let her down.
Oh, you let your parents down a lot when it comes to telling wrestling stories. Maybe not in the real world life and everything like that, but you told your dad, no, Dad, it's a Dusty finish. Well, let's just wait for it here. And now telling Mom, no, Mom, they're really two different people, but God bless it. I love, when we see our parents or people older than us and our family and things like that get into it like that, and they know something's right, and it's maybe not so much true, but you love the passion involved.
Yeah, but hey, I made it up to my dad years later. Jim Cornette, I don't know if it was Christmas 89 or Christmas 88, called my house to talk to me for something. And I was working my part-time job, and he talked to my dad for almost 2 hours.
Wow, unbelievable.
On the telephone on a Christmas night.
Wow, that's a lot of talking, even for Corny.
Yeah, and My dad talked about that, and when I was able to introduce him to Jim Cornette and Bobby Eaton backstage at the Tom Robinson benefit show.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, a couple years later,
Right.
and right before he passed away in the nursing home, he did have his picture of himself, Bobby Eaton, and Jim Cornette on his little nightstand in the nursing home.
Wow,
and
that's cool.
Even as he's starting to go senile, that's one memory that always stayed with him, was meeting them there and the Christmas call.
Well, all is
from
forgiven. Then, well, if I got a Christmas call for 2 hours from Cornette, I'd be happy too. That's a pretty damn cool story. I'd never heard that from you before, so something new for me anyway. So we go back, though, to the storyline here. It's Super D in the ring. It's Scott Irwin under the mask, but he answers to Superstar when Steve-O shouts from afar. He turns around. Uh-oh, what did he do? Did he just expose himself? Is it one and the same, Superstar and Super D? We know it's not, but they lead us to believe it's possible. And that's all the confirmation that Tommy Rich needs. Wildfire darting to the ring in street clothes and a cowboy hat. Rich, though, stopped and dragged all the way back by several babyface wrestlers. Super D then wisely and quickly going for the Cobra hold to score the win here in about 5 minutes' time.
Great angle. It served its purpose. They didn't show them getting their hands on each other. Thus, when they finally will meet, you know it's going to be a war.
Right, and it's not even over yet. As post-match, the Great Mephisto speaking with Gordon Solie trashing Tommy Rich when Stan Hansen gonna interrupt. Stan telling Mephisto how lucky he is, and the Masked Man is, that Tommy Rich is being held back right now. Mephisto taking exception to the comments made by Stan Hansen, so he instructs the Super Destroyer to reapply the Cobra Clutch on Gilbert in the ring. And the Masked Man blasting referee Scrappy McGowan out of the way and going back after Gilbert. But Stan Hansen not going to sit by and let it happen. Hansen slugging Mephisto on the floor and then hits the ring to attack the Super Destroyer. But look out, Stan. Torquemada from behind, the heels looking for a 2-on-1 attack on the bad man from Borger. But look out. It's Tommy Rich back out. Rich returns. And a wild brawl between all four men going to take us into a commercial break. I wrote, sell those ticket, boys. Fun segment.
Southern wrestling at its best right there.
That is indeed. And happening all the way back in 1981, the pull-apart brawl leading into the commercial break, hyping up the fans. They can't wait to see what goes down in the tag team matchup at the Omni. The following night, Stan Hansen and Tommy Rich going to team up. And I can't wait either. As the real superstar, guys, I want everybody to know Bill Eadie is not even in Georgia. Remember, they do the old suspension angle here. He's actually off on a tour of New Japan. At this point in time, he will return November the 5th. He's in New Japan right now, wrestling without the mask, believe it or not, Jamie, under the name Billy Crusher. So he's not selling himself as the superstar, even though he works the entire tour in superstar clothing. And the fans had seen him before with the mask, so it was really confusing that he goes as Billy Crusher on that particular tour. Again, Eadie going to return to the States after the November 5th date, the end of his tour. Going to be back in Georgia. The first confirmed match I have with him is November 9th.
With him appearing as Billy Crusher, there was a picture going around Facebook a little while back, and it said Billy Crusher, and nobody really knew who it was until finally somebody said, you know, that's Bill Eadie, the Masked Superstar.
Yeah, I've seen the picture in the past, and I'm assuming it had to be from that particular tour. I don't think he worked as Billy Crusher in any other tour over there. And I feel like I used to remember the reason. I remember looking up the reason why he was using that gimmick on that particular tour, but I'll be damned if I can remember it off the top of my head right now. But I have to look that back up, guys. We'll get it to you in the next episode. But right now we go back to the ring for Brian Blair taking on Brian St. John. This should be fun. A solid matchup, if nothing else. And it is. Back and forth encounter. If you appreciate solid TV wrestling, this is it. Blair going to reverse a gut wrench attempt, land his own for a 2 count late in the matchup, and then the bell sounds. Is hour number 1 rapidly coming to a close? Time for the old Bob Neal football scoreboard. This match ruled a time limit draw, 6 minutes and 50 seconds.
Screw Bob Neal.
Well,
I could have got a 10-minute draw there, Ray.
You could have got a whole 10-minute draw.
I had to settle for 6 minutes and 50 seconds.
It was fine for what it was. They're not doing anything special with either one of these guys, but it was good TV action.
Oh, absolutely. And Brian St. John, believe it or not, has been here almost 7 months at this point.
He's been here one of the longer tenured guys right now in the entire territory. It's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, him and Iron Mike Sharp Jr., of course.
Of course.
Okay.
As we continue on, Roddy Piper going to break down hour number 1 with Gordon here. Roddy does mention at some point around this time that Dusty Rhodes says he puts his pants on one leg at a time. Well, Roddy will have us know he does them both at once. He's just that much better.
And he is. Remember, Piper was world light heavyweight champion at the age of 16. He told us. We know it's fact.
Well, we do know that he was working Chavo out there at a very young age and selling out. It was the last big sellout there in the Los Angeles territory was the feud between Roddy Piper and Chavo Guerrero in the mid to late 70s as part of the LaBelle territory.
Right. And then he had that quick run in the WWF.
A very quick run. And the only thing I noted here in the first hour, Roddy Piper-wise, that I noticed that I really hadn't paid attention to before, I said, he's got to cut back on those rolling R's, a lot of from Roddy Piper as he pronounces things. Not really sure what he was going for with that.
He's an American original.
Definitely an original.
But let's go back and look at the whole first hour Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
It's just so refreshing to look back at something like this compared to what we have had for the last 30, 40 years. You have a heel commentator who isn't yelling. He's just telling it how it is, saying Mr. Wrestling 2 by doing this or that. That's not the way he would do it, but it's effective for Mr. Wrestling 2. But then again, the match would have been over in 2 minutes had it been Roddy Piper in the ring instead of Mr. Wrestling 2. Too many guys are just taking their time. Roddy Piper doesn't get paid by the hour. Roddy Piper goes in and gets the match over and collects his winner's share.
And I'll say this too, people are going to point out, well, there were heels that did color commentary in other territories. Of course, Bill Watts would have the special guest commentators from week to week, many times heels, Ernie Ladd, Bob Roop, guys like that. One-off shows, and they're really just wrestlers filling in that spot next to Boyd Pierce. This is somebody that's going to become a long-tenured announcer here alongside Gordon Solie, and it really hadn't been done like this before. And I enjoy this much more than a heel coming in that's already involved in an angle or a feud so that they can come out there and run down the baby faces, run down the guy they're working against. Roddy Piper, at this point, he has no feud. He has no agenda. It's never been done before in this context to where he's not coming out here and just being a straight-up heel. He's giving his analysis as to why he feels the way he does. It's not just, I hate so-and-so because they're so-and-so. He's giving you reasons why he doesn't agree with their style or what they're doing.
Exactly, and WrestleCopia's own Uncle Bob Roop, when you get into Mid-South in the, 82, and he gets a nice little run. Not every single week, but every couple weeks, he's in there as a heel commentator.
Yes.
And he kind of borrows Piper's style. He doesn't exactly jump all over people, but nowhere near the quality of Roddy Piper.
No, definitely not.
Bob Roop did try to model himself after Piper.
Yeah, it was definitely, he would explain more. It was more of a wrestling type breakdown. You're absolutely right there. I totally agree. As we kick off hour number 2 here, Roddy Piper reintroduced again for the new fans joining alongside Gordon Solie. We get the replay also. Can't miss that. Steve-O tricking Super Destroyer, or should I say Superstar, as we head to the ring to see Steve-O take on Jim Nelson. Nelson getting ready for his upcoming gimmick, apparently in Jim Crockett Promotions, because he's already rocking a crew cut here in Georgia. Roddy Piper making sense of why Super D answered to Superstar earlier. Roddy says maybe he thought Superstar was coming to the ring, so he turned his head to look. Makes sense. Roddy Piper, thinking man's wrestler.
Yeah, and a great cover by Piper, supporting his fellow heel right there.
Yeah. Gordon mentioning that Steve-O's background was initially as a high school teacher. Roddy thinks that maybe Steve should have stayed there. Would have made a great math teacher. Steve-O, though, in control early on, but Jim Nelson does indeed take over. Nice backbreaker, bear hug, gut wrench suplex, working over the back of Steve-O. Good psychology from Jim Nelson, but Steve-O finally firing back with a couple of karate-style kicks and a top rope double chop. Going to score the win here for Mr. Olsonowski, Mr. Personality. Match goes 7 minutes and 5 seconds.
Steve-O's starting to get his groove back at this point.
Well, up next, Jamie, you can go back to sleep for a couple minutes if you want to, because it's Gary Hart out here with the Great Kabuki. Gordon Solie has heard that Kabuki has worked as a mercenary in the past. Where did that come from, Gordon? Gary says Kabuki has, quote unquote, squatted in the bush many times. You could take that many different ways, Jammie Ward. Hart also says that Halloween has passed, whatever that means. They give a fair warning of all the people. They've talked about wrestling too. They've talked about Steve-O. Now Kabuki randomly, apparently gunning for Dusty Rhodes. As we see Kabuki here spew some of that green fog. So Kabuki taking on all comers now, kind of looking at Dusty Rhodes, but you got to love it. He has squatted in the bush many a times, Gordon.
I have no idea where he came up with that one. I mean, it would have made it for a great video, though, of like Kabuki
squatting in a bush
and have him squatting in a bush before he jumps out.
I suppose in Jerry Jarrett's backyard, maybe? I don't know.
Him and Kamala side by side.
That would have been fantastic. We go to the ring to see Kabuki in action. Gary Hart in his corner. His opponent this week, Mike Jackson. Quicker than a hiccup, Mike Jackson tries his speed early on, but finds himself covered in the green stuff. And Kabuki laying in the chops and kicks, underarm nerve hold of doom, and a middle rope chop to the back of Mike's head. Jackson, though, finally going to fire up, flying head scissors and a monkey flip on Kabuki. The painted one attempted to land on his feet out of said monkey flip. He was supposed to anyways, but Kabuki pops up anyway, lands the thrust kick, then walks the middle rope for that diving chop to score the win. Match goes 2.5 minutes.
The dreaded Kabuki. All right, let me go back to sleep. You finish up.
Okay, so I posted this many weeks ago now on my social media at the end of this matchup. I had to pop for this one. Kabuki at the end of the matchup, for anybody who's ever paid attention, he does that little weird spinning taunt, as they would call it in a video game. That's a spinning taunt deal. But as he does it, a group of fans, 4 or 5 fans, all stand up and in unison do it with him, all in sync. I had to pop for it.
It was interesting.
Early smart marks.
Yeah, good point there.
But I the only other note I have for this one, I wrote, man, Mike Jackson absent from the first hour entirely and then works Kabuki here in the second half. I wrote, kind of a waste of Mike Jackson this week.
You got to remember, he's not the Alabama Junior Heavyweight Champion yet. That's coming.
I just thought he was born.
I've heard that
born
yet.
with that one. I thought he was born with the belt.
Now, I think he still has to win it from Jerry Stubbs yet.
Okay, very good. There's another masked guy. Maybe Mr. Olympia was Superstar with Super D. I don't know. We get a replay of also the altercation we saw in hour number 1 between Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, laying the slap down on the Nature Boy. And then back to the ring for tag team action now. Wildfire Tommy Rich teaming with Stan Hansen, taking on Tony Russo and Billy Joe Good. Fun opening there with Rich and Russo in the ring. Then the babyface is going to work over Big Billy Joe. Hansen in with a high knee. Very impressive, Stan. And a big elbow on Good as well. Try as they might, the heels just can't get it going. They get a few shots in, but they stand no chance. Tommy Rich going to drop kick Good into the corner, and then double backdrop by the babyfaces, followed by, the lariat to the face of Good. Going to give the babyfaces the win, 4 minutes and 7 seconds.
Boy, Stan is having the time of his life this week, isn't he? He's having a lot of fun. But you know what caught my eye for this match?
What's that?
It's about 15 years too early, but Tommy Rich was previewing his FBI look.
Oh, I'd have to go back and check it out.
He had the hair totally combed back, just like he did when he was in ECW.
Oh, nice. Well, did he have a flag with his face on it? That's the big question.
Not yet. Not yet. But he had to perfect the hair first.
Well, you got to start somewhere. As the Wildfire and Stan Hansen look ready for tomorrow night in the Omni, we get an interview from those two, but they're joined by a big surprise. Boy, I'll say big. The return of one Big Red to the Georgia territory. It's announced at this point that Big Red will be the referee for tomorrow night's tag team matchup between the two teams we were just talking about, Hansen and Rich versus Super Destroyer and Torquemada. Somehow Big Red going to be the referee now, which doesn't really seem fair because he's out here cutting a promo and hugging all over Hansen and Tommy Rich.
Oh, I love me some Big Red.
Well, I'll tell you what, nobody can bring happiness to this. No, not since World League Wrestling, not since WLW.
That's right.
Yeah, it's good to see Big Red back in the chair. That big smile will just light up anybody's life. So we talked about it, the return of Big Red. Kind of odd that he's the referee in a matchup and showing favoritism right here, if you ask me anyway. But we go back to the ring. Got to see Ray the Crippler Stevens take on Gerald Finley. Finley must have returned with Big Red. I haven't seen, well, I think Finley was on the last TV too, but he was also, the last time I think we saw him was in WLW. So maybe they came back together. I don't know. But Finley shot into the corner upside down, taking a crazy bump from the Crippler. Not quite as good as Ray Stevens used to do it, but it is what it is. Finley also missing a mile-high dropkick. Boy, did he get up high, but right down on the back of his head. Ray Stevens all over him, and the pile driver does him in 1 minute and 4 seconds.
I bet Ray didn't like that flip into the corner.
No, I don't think it could have been homage, but I don't think Ray's one of those guys that thinks sincerest form of flattery is imitation.
I mean, that's like Duggan giving to the knee lift off the second row, or pulling the mask off the old Lone Ranger. Or...
Can't do any of those things. Right now,
No.
Tommy Rich looking to pull some masks off himself. We also hear from the Crippler here, along with the great Mephisto. Tommy Rich has more friends than they were aware of, Jamie, but they say, keep bringing them in, Tommy, and we'll keep knocking them down. They also talk the Superstar's bounty on the head of Rich, which they still plan to collect. We've seen Stevens fail on some of the house shows, but I'm assuming they're still doing a few more. Also, at this point, we hear again from the NWA World Champion, Ric Flair, who says it'd be easy to lose his cool after being slapped in the face, but learn to love it, Dusty Rhodes, because Ric Flair, his greatest satisfaction will come when he takes Dusty apart at the Omni. 2 referees, no disqualification, which is the first I'm hearing about that.
Yeah, I caught the same thing. I think Flair just misspoke. But what I will say about this little Ric Flair Dusty Rhodes feud now, this is the first time we've really seen Flair really going over top as a heel. Up to now, he's been
the irate heel.
Yeah, he's been a heel, but he hasn't been that nasty heel, and it's starting to come out now.
Oh, totally, absolutely. As man, they're beating this to death. We saw it live in the first hour. We're getting a second time replay. We've seen it twice now in the second hour. Steve-O calling out the Super Destroyer as the superstar. They're really trying to push that hard. Then it's back to the ring for Ted Oates taking on Jose Medina. Both men spend time in control here. Medina given some time to shine against Ted Oates. Wouldn't happen on the Columbus TV, I assure you. Oates, though, battling back as Gordon says Ted was just testing Medina in there. Oates busting out a kip up, which I popped for, didn't see that coming, but goes right into a front face lock. I wrote, what a waste. You kip up and lock in a front face lock. But it is 1981 after all. We get a nice knee lift here from Oates, and eventually a single leg dive leads into a spinning toe hold. Ted Oates goes over 7 minutes and 9 seconds.
You know, this match didn't make the syndicated version.
No, I would hope not anyway.
But I'll tell you what else. When you look at Ted Oates now, I mean, Jerry had that great perm going on a few weeks ago. Ted now with the beard, I actually had to do a double look here. I thought it was Matt Bourne at one point. At a quick glance, it looked like Matt Bourne.
I totally get what you're saying in regards to, because they both really changed up their look, and honestly, it's like a resurgence really for both of them if they would give them something to do. But again, when your big comeback is a kip up into a front face lock, you got to work on some more flashy moves every once in a while, Ted. That's just my opinion anyway. As we go off now, you said you would defend this, Jamie. It's been a few weeks since I posted this online, but it's Michael Hayes conducting an interview complete in what I called a pink blouse. Okay, defend away.
Well, Michael is very secure in his manhood. Only real men can pull off pink. I can pull off pink.
Hey, I love pink. I have a lot of pinks.
And I've seen Ray Russell pull off pink.
That's right. I'm not knocking the color. This thing looked like a blouse, like a satin blouse worn by Michael Hayes. It wasn't so much the color. The color factors in, but it was really more about just the entire style. What was going on here? And don't say it was 1981.
We know Michael Hayes was a trendsetter.
Well, he didn't set that trend. I didn't see that take off anywhere.
Well, he tried. He tried.
Well, nevertheless, it was fun times posting that online, getting a lot of feedback. Michael says hello. Remember, he referenced his little brother many months ago. Wanted to say hi to him at home there. Says he's going to see him soon. Probably visit his buddy Frumpy, too, I would have to imagine, Jamie.
Oh, hey, I wonder if Roy's team won the baseball championships. Remember, that's right. That was part of it. He was going down there to watch his little brother Roy.
Yeah, well, he's coming back soon to say hello to friends and family. Michael Hayes out here for a specific reason, though. Apparently, he takes an hour and 45 minutes of the program for him to announce that he had a long conversation with his good buddy, Otis Sistrunk, over the phone. The travel apparently was a little bit more than Otis had expected, being away from his family, and Sistrunk has decided to retire from professional wrestling. I wrote, can you retire after working somewhere for a month?
You know, it was a long trip from Mars and back all the time.
The man from Mars.
It was just wearing him down.
Well, Michael Hayes, not sure what's going to happen with the Georgia Tag Team titles. That's up to the promoters. That's up to President Jim Crockett. But Michael thanks Otis for his time that they spent together, calls him a good guy, and he respects him as a man. So it is official, guys. The Otis era has come to a conclusion. It wasn't that long ago. It just got started, ended as quickly as it began.
And we have a moment of silence in memory of Otis Sistrunk,
who is still alive, by the way. As we continue on, NWA World Tag Team Champions Ole and Gene Anderson, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, taking on Bob Russell and Bruno Sammartino Jr., a.k.a. David Sammartino. And I wrote in my notes here, weird spot for Bruno on the show. We haven't seen him a whole lot on TV lately, and now stuck in a match against the Andersons, but his partner, a little less than stellar.
Yeah, just like the George Wells and Iron Mike Sharp Jr. in recent weeks. When they don't put you with a good partner, you know where you're headed.
Well, Bob Russell in early, and some salty arm work by the Andersons, just wearing down poor Russell, as only the Wrecking Crew can do. We see the patented hammerlock body slam, but Russell finally able to tag out to Bruno, who comes in on fire, delivering a gorilla press slam on Gene Anderson. Now, I know Gene probably made the call there, but wow, seeing Gene Anderson take a press slam in 1981, kind of cool.
Yeah, I didn't think Gene was getting up. I mean, Gene's only in his 40s there, but he looks like he's like 67.
He certainly does. It's like watching Sweet Daddy Siki in 85. He looks like he's 70 and he's 44. Unfucking believable.
What? Sweet Daddy Siki was only 44?
My age in 1985.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought he was a lot older than that.
I thought he was pushing 70. Yeah, we had that conversation. But it seems to be accurate. Yeah, he was still in his mid-40s, looking about 70 all the way back in 1985. Still kicking too, his Sweet Daddy.
He could probably get another run in WWE if he wanted to come back.
Well, I don't know if he had much of a run there in Memphis in 85. I don't know what he would. I don't know. Well,
you had Psycho Negro there too.
He was. He's about to make his debut on the next edition of the Memphis show. In fact, the Cyclops. Yeah, he was a little older though. He was in his 50s by that point, and he looked it in the ring. But that's the Cyclops, guys. That's the Memphis 85 project here on Regional Rasslin. Not to be confused with Georgia 81, as we have the Wrecking Crew in the ring to remind us against Bob Russell and Bruno. Bruno with the hot tag, pressing Gene Anderson. Winds up in the wrong corner, though, and the world champion's back in control. At that point, Bob Russell going to tag back in, gets eaten alive. Nasty hammerlock slam again by Ole. Gene then just stomping that arm unmercifully. Ole then with the Anderson armbar, finally putting Russell out of his poor misery. Match goes 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Fun win there from the Andersons, who cut a promo to end the show. They promised to take on all comers. Unfortunately, believe it or not, Jamie, this will mark Gene Anderson's final appearance on TBS.
For this run. I'm not going to say he works a match.
Okay.
But he's definitely on television for an interview. Or it might even been during that championship wrestling from Georgia period.
I'll have to do some digging. I couldn't find any more results in the Georgia territory proper. I'm in regards to television anyway.
I'm not saying he worked a match, but I know he at least came back for at least a promo at some point.
Right. And I mean, he'll be on TBS with Crockett and whatnot down the line as well with some things they do there. But in regards to his wrestling career in the ring, the best I could tell, this is his final match on TV. He was going to work Chattanooga 3 or 4 more times going into November. And that's pretty much it for Gene's run here in 1981, Georgia anyway.
Had we verified if he had a stroke yet by this point?
I have not, but all signs, well, he may have had something by this point. I can't say, but I know the big deal.
Because he had a twitch going on.
Yeah, but I think that was like nerve damage or something, if I remember correctly, from years prior. But yeah, I don't really know. I'd have to go in and look at all of that again, but I know it's coming very soon. Whatever hits him next is going to put him out for a longer period of time, and that's when the NWA World Tag Titles are going to become vacant here very shortly. But it was fun to see the Andersons out here and Gene Anderson taking a bump. Maybe it was Bruno that put Gene on the shelf there with that press slam. I don't know. But we'll talk a lot more about that and so much more as we come back another week of TV. And the Omni still here as well. We'll be back with more Georgia wrestling goodness after this WrestleCopia timeout.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Rasslin podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jammie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Rasslin. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Rasslin Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Rasslin Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Rasslin Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Rasslin, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, where we go, what do we do? Be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
All right, guys, welcome back to the program. Another week of Georgia to get into here. We're going to close out Halloween night in Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County Civic Center, Jamie. Going to be Steve O over the French Angel, Brian Blair scoring a win over Jim Duggan, Wrestling 2 defeating Mike Sharp, who is still here, Great Kabuki downing Bruno Jr., and in the main event, Tommy Rich and Stan Hansen getting ready for the Omni. They defeat the team of Ray Stevens and Tor Kamada. Then it's off November 1st, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Memorial Auditorium. Matches on the card, I don't have results, but it's Steve O against Jim Duggan, Stevens and Kamada against Stan Hansen and Wrestling 2. Now there's a hell of a team.
Ooh, that's a team. And we get to see the debut of the Great Kabuki on the road now.
Great Kabuki taking on George Wells, no doubt Kabuki going over there. Terry Gordy up against Michael Hayes in a baby bottle match, and world champion Ric Flair scheduled to take on Tommy Rich in the main event. I don't have the finish, but I do know Ric Flair retains in Chattanooga. Also, November the 1st, later in the evening, it's off to the Omni in Atlanta for a big card. I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I've got about 9 matches on the card here, as it's Big Red in the opener, scoring a win over Mike Sharp.
That's tough. Battle of two of my favorites.
I was going to say, it's a tough one for you to pick a winner.
I mean, I would have really been hurt seeing Mike Sharp take the loss, but in retrospect, we know Iron Mike's about to move on to bigger and better things.
Sure, if you want to call it that. Also, it's Bruno Jr. over the French Angel, Terry Gordy on the undercard in the Omni. After a year on top in main events, it's Terry Gordy scoring a win over Brian Blair in the third match on the show. And if it doesn't get any worse than that, well, Michael Hayes in the fourth match on the show, picking up a preliminary win over Brian St. John. What is going on here?
They must have wore Ole Anderson down big time. And Ole just decided, you know what, I'm not dealing with this anymore. How can I drive these guys out of here?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what goes on here. How do you go from headlining to, I don't want to say curtain jerking, every one of these matches, that sounds cliche, but I mean, you open with Big Red and Mike Sharp. I mean, this is not a bad show. Gordy and Hayes are working Brian St. John and Brian Blair, very capable hands, but they're not really being utilized at this point. Hayes and Gordy coming off that giant feud, headlining Omni cards. They've been selling it out most of the year. Of course, it takes two to tango. Their opponents as well involved in those before their feud with each other. But it just seems odd. You just kind of go astray here and just pivot away, and they're off in preliminary matches.
Yeah, it makes no sense. But however, the match that does make sense is the next one with Kabuki beating Mr. Personality Steve O. I mean, it's the battle of the karate masters.
That's right. It's the it's American Karate versus Gung Fu. Remember, the Gung Fu of Kabuki. It's deadly, defeating that pretty little American karate man Steve O, going down to Kabuki. Got to save Kabuki for bigger things. Also, Austin Idol Darlin, remember he returned. Idol scoring a win over Wrestling 2 on a DQ, and Dickie Slater back in town, scoring a win over Ray the Crippler Stevens by disqualification. I'm sure you remember Dick. He was in a box last we saw him.
It's my dick in a box. Ooh, my dick in a box, girl.
Yeah, and where was Dick on television yesterday?
Dick Slater
pushed this match up. Yeah.
From my memory, and this is why I know he was not in the box for those 2 weeks, I believe Dick Slater was booking the Southwest Territory at this time. And he was just coming in.
Oh, he was
for
already
these
down
shots.
there. Okay.
Yeah, I think he was booker down there. If I remember my timeline correctly, I think Slater was doing the shows down there in Southwest. So I think he was just coming up for the big shows here. And of course, when he had to, escape from the box, the Dick in the Box angle, which lots of great feedback for that.
Speaking of Southwest, it's, I always go off on a tangent here. I believe we're almost to the date where Southwest starts to appear on USA Network.
Well, we're in the fall season. It's very possible that, that's when they hook up. I don't remember the time frame either exactly to the month. We're going to continue on. We got two big matchups still to come here at the Omni, including Stan Hansen and Tommy Rich scoring a win over Tor Kamada and the Super Destroyer. Remember, Big Red was the referee for that. Was there some shenanigans in play with Big Red in there? I don't know, because we don't have the footage. We do know the baby face is going over. Would have loved to have seen how that one played out. But then it's off to the main event, and this is really odd. It is NWA World Champion Ric Flair slated to take on the former champion Dusty Rhodes in a rematch, because Flair won the title. Then Dusty got his rematch here in the Omni, and we had a schmoz, to quote the Hitman. And this was the rematch, which was supposed to be in front of two referees, because we got the Dusty finish last time around, if I remember correctly. But there is no Dusty Rhodes. Instead, it's Ric Flair taking on Tommy Rich. And Flair going to go over here. So Tommy doing double duty. Flair scoring a win by DQ. I've also read that Tommy Rich wins by DQ. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. And apparently they did indeed keep the two referees. So even though Dusty wasn't part of the match, they kept the two referees. And they waived that whole no DQ thing that Ric Flair was talking about. But all I had to say at the end of this was, what the fuck?
For some reason in my memory here, and I didn't pick it up when we get to the November 7th show, but something sticks in my mind that says Dusty Rhodes came out for this match and Kabuki sprayed him in the eyes with a green mist. And Tommy Rich ends up replacing Dusty in the match.
I do know, and I don't want to spoil too far ahead as far as TV goes here, I do know that they're going to play into something that involved Dusty and Kabuki, leading to Tommy replacing Ric Flair. Storyline-wise, I didn't know if it took place actually in front of the fans or not, was my confusion.
Again, I don't know why. I just had that in my head for some reason.
Oh, no, I would totally believe it if they did.
It might have been on the Sunday show. Mm-hmm. Like on the November 8th, they may have shown it. Just for some reason, that's just sticking in my head. Because it leads to a...
well, it certainly would make more sense to actually...
Kabuki-Dusty match down the line here.
Right, yeah. I mean,
in December.
I know we have the story coming on the TV here in a moment that Kabuki took Dusty out. I know that. And I know that they say Tommy Rich made the save and replaced him in this match. My confusion really was just, did this happen in front of fans so they knew what the fuck was going on? Or was this one of those made-up stories like Tommy Rich coming after Super D in the locker room? I was so confused because... Dusty was at TV that morning, the day before, and Dusty works the house show the very next day. So if he was injured, it was very temporary, because we move on to November 2nd, Augusta, Georgia, Bell Auditorium, Mike Sharp over Bruno Jr., Stan Hansen defeating Tor Kamada, Great Kabuki over George Wells, Tommy Rich beating the Super Destroyer, and then six-man action, going to see Wrestling 2, Michael Hayes, and Dusty Rhodes over Terry Gordy, Ray Stevens, and the Great Mephisto by DQ. By the way, what a card.
Yeah, that's a loaded card for Augusta, Georgia.
Ole seems to be phasing out the lower tail wrestlers for some of these house shows lately. I mean, your openers are now Mike Sharp, Bruno Jr., guys like that. George Wells is on the card, but not so much. We don't see a whole lot of the other guys, the guys that we were seeing before in the opening matches, the Timses and things like that.
Maybe, and I'm forgetting going forward, maybe he's getting ready to restock the roster.
It's very probable. I mean, we've seen some names coming in. We know a lot more names are about to appear in just a moment on this next episode of TV. We'll get to that. Before we do, one more result for you guys. November 4th in Columbus at the Memorial Auditorium in Georgia. Tor Kamada over Bruno Jr. Big Red defeating the French Angel by DQ. By DQ? Really? Can't give Big Red a win in that one? Ugh.
I'd have been torn on that match too because, I love me some French Angel.
You do. I don't get it, but you do. Also, it's Ivan Koloff in town, teaming with Ray Stevens. There's an old school team taking on Wrestling 2 and Brian Blair. The heel's going over there, and this is the last confirmed match I have for Brian Blair, but a few cards do promote him up through the first week of November. But best I can tell, I can only confirm Brian Blair wrestles here on November 4th. He may still be here another week, but I can't say for positive.
He was a very good hand while he was here.
He was, and he's going to go off to do a few months for the Mid-South territory. Not going to light the world on fire there either. I know he, gets involved with Leroy McGurk's daughter around that time as well, Mike McGurk. Yeah, the rest is history. Obviously, she goes on to date other wrestlers, Ted DiBiase for one of them, and so on and so forth. She'll have a nice run with the WWF from 1988 through 1993. But right now, guys, we're back in 1981, and I don't want to confuse you with all of that. So we look at some of the other matches here in Columbus, including Tommy Rich over Austin Idol by DQ. That would have been fun. And Columbus is going to get them some Gordy scoring a win over Michael Hayes to close the night.
Very interesting result there. But then again, a lot of these cards, it seems like they were alternating nights.
Yeah.
Who was winning between Gordy and Hayes. And, they're all both going back to the hotel anyway.
It seems like the nights Michael Hayes
do
goes
what
over.
Freebirds do.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, can we have conjoining rooms? Can we have the door in between? So don't break kayfabe in public, guys. But, I looked through here, and Michael Hayes is pretty much going over on the baby bottle match nights, which makes sense. And Gordy goes over on the non-baby bottle match nights. So it all plays in there. They're putting each other over. Good friends, Gordy and Hayes, who will, spoiler alert, team once again someday. As of right now, no results, but on Thursday night, November 5th, they were in Waycross, Georgia at the City Auditorium, and Friday night, November 6th, Clayton, Georgia at the old high school gym. Not the new high school gym. Don't want to be confused with that. It's the old high school gym in Clayton, Georgia.
I'm glad you get that straight, Ray.
Thank you. As we go on now to another edition of TBS Rasslin, it's Georgia Championship Wrestling, November the 7th, Atlanta, GA, hosted again by Gordon Solie, and back by popular demand. He is no longer Roddy Piper, but rather Rod Piper is joining the show this week with Godden.
Good old TR Tom Robinson used to do a great Gordon Solie saying, Rod Piper. Yours is pretty damn good too, right?
Yeah, it's years of practice, unfortunately. I have nothing better to do. They stand out here promoting, well, they're going to address the elephant in the room immediately. There's a 6-foot-tall trophy out there for the upcoming National Tag Title Tournament. Well, they don't announce it as that yet, but there is a tag tournament coming up Thanksgiving night at the Omni, and the winner going to get $20,000 and this trophy, and we're going to find out in just a few minutes that the vacant Georgia tag titles are on the line, but now they're once again the national tag team titles, it would appear.
Yeah, they can't make up their mind what they want to call those belts. I mean, the Freebirds were the national tag team champs, but once they dropped it to Steve-O and Ted DiBiase, it went back to Georgia again. But now we're headed back to national, where it's going to stay for a long time.
Well, apparently, maybe we will still get that film of the altercation you referenced. I haven't watched ahead. It's hard to watch ahead when I have so much to cover here from so many different shows. But they do mention at the beginning of this show that there was reportedly a situation between Great Kabuki, Dusty Rhodes, and Tommy Rich recently, and that the film is currently being reviewed by the NWA board. So maybe that film will still pop up here next week on TV. I'm not sure. At least they're talking about it.
Okay, see, I knew I saw it, but maybe I'm just a little ahead of the game here.
It's possible. I'm looking forward to it. It'll make a lot more sense in the context of things once we get there. But right now we go to the ring. Oh man, I've been waiting for this all year long. Bullet Bob Armstrong is back in Georgia, and he brings with him his young son, Brad Armstrong. So it's Bob and Brad Armstrong in the ring, and they're getting ready for that big tag. We're going to see a lot of tag teams coming in here, guys, getting ready for that tag team tournament Thanksgiving night. And one of those teams, the Armstrongs, father and son duo, taking on Brian St. John and Rick Stone. And St. John going to start with Brad here and let the fun begin, because Brad Armstrong is in the ring. Armstrong's in complete control for the first several minutes. St. John finally cutting Brad off, taking him over to the heel side, working Brad over. And as the fans begin to chant, "Go, Brad, go!" he's able to make the tag out to Papa Armstrong. Bullet Bob in, lands a few haymakers on Stone. Tag back to Brad, who lands a running crossbody, sort of. Stone actually taking the bump before Brad can even really connect. But either way, it's going to get the 1, 2, 3, and the Armstrongs are victorious 4 minutes and 41 seconds.
But what's really interesting about this matchup is Rod Piper's commentary, where this sets the stage for what will come in a few weeks, where Piper's talking about how a father and son team can't be a true team, because sometimes you have to sacrifice your partner,
right?
Sometimes you have to stay outside the ring. let your partner take the beating so then you can come in as the fresh man and then finish the other team off because they have worn themselves down. He doubts the Armstrongs can do that because there's no way he can. Bob can stand on the outside of the ring while his son gets beat up,
well, we'll have
or
to see.
vice versa.
Yeah, we'll have to see how they fare.
Great commentary from Piper.
Yeah, Roddy trying to lend again, going back and kind of putting down the baby faces, but lending an analytical approach, if you will, to it. As Roddy Piper mentioning that it just doesn't see them being able to pull it off, but we'll have to see if the Armstrongs prove the hot rod wrong. As we go on now, we get an interview from the wild-fired Tommy Rich, and I wrote, holy shit, Tommy Rich wearing the national title. It just doesn't look real to me. I don't know, it might be the first time I've seen Tommy actually wearing the belt, as apparently there were issues recently between Dusty and Kabuki, and so Tommy Rich was able to make the save, so he says here, as they change the conversation then back to Super Destroyer and Masked Superstar. Are they the same man? Rich going to make a good point here, that, well, he could be in a bar or out at the movies with a pretty young Georgia Peach, Jamie, and he don't know what the masked man looks like, or the masked men for that matter. They could easily attack him without him realizing who they are. That's kind of scary, actually. Tommy then talking about his bounty, and even Tommy Rich not sure how much money the bounty's actually worth.
You know what? I have in my notes here, this is the first time we've seen Tommy wearing the national title. I wonder if Superstar might have taken it to Japan with him, but by accident.
Well, I don't think it's by accident. I don't know why he would want to get on a plane and fly to Japan with that, especially when he's not working as the superstar.
Yeah, good point. But yeah, that's the first time we've seen him wear the belt. I mean, unless it got lost and they had to get a new one made, something like that. But,
right.
But that is great commentary by Tommy, not knowing these two guys are in the bar, going to take him out. And
I don't know what they look like, Gordon. I mean, they could be standing right next to me, or they could give me a shiv, and I wouldn't even know it was coming. I wrote, Tommy sounds a little paranoid here, not sure what he's taking today.
And this is really the first time Tommy's even mentioned the bounty since the original taping with the bounty.
Right, yeah. Well, there's another guy in the territory who may want to collect on that bounty. That is the Russian Bear. Ivan Koloff has arrived, taking on Don Gilbert here. Gordon says Koloff is in the ring here holding a belt. Gordon calls it, at this point in the show, one half of the European Tag Team titles. Says Koloff is the European Tag Champs along with Chris Markoff. And as I looked at the belt, I said, I'm pretty sure that's actually the Mid-Atlantic TV title that he just won over Ron Bass earlier the same week. But they have to sell the teams for Thanksgiving here, and Ivan Koloff coming in as part of that tag team tournament. Gilbert going to surprise Koloff with a few shots throughout the matchup, even landing a crossbody at one point, but the Russian Bear in control most of the way, working the backbreaker, knee drop off the middle rope, the same knee that beat Bruno Sammartino, I'll have you guys know. And I think at one point the fans are actually chanting kill Koloff with the riding knee off the top rope into the back of Gilbert's head. Match goes 5 minutes, 10 seconds.
I thought they were chanting kill also.
What a heel crowd wanting to watch Koloff end Don Gilbert's life here today. Yeah, this is taped in the morning, Jamie. They're chanting kill in the morning.
This crowd was hot. I mean, maybe Gordon held a meet and greet and everybody had a little taste ahead of time. I don't know.
Oh, man. Is that what they were giving away? Jesus, I would have came to the meet and greets back then. I don't know. Gordon Solie, though, mentioning, and he's got to sell this here because the knee drop is illegal from the top rope. We saw Koloff do it off the middle rope. We also saw him ride the back of the head of Gilbert to the canvas from the top rope. So Gordon mentioning the knee off the top rope at DQ, but since Ivan drove it down, rode Gilbert down with it, it wasn't illegal. So Gordon, again, explaining things away.
The only way Gordon can.
That's right. Gordon is really good at doing these type of things. His commentary also mentioned the return of a tag team by the name of Ray Stevens. Well, he's already been here, but his partner for the tournament, supposedly, is going to be Pat Patterson. Stevens and Patterson, legendary team from San Francisco. They could be reuniting here by Thanksgiving night.
Well, Stevens is convinced they are.
He certainly is. Certainly sounds that way. Bob and Brad Armstrong in an interview here, shilling the National Tag Team Title Tournament Thanksgiving night, so they confirm it. The title's on the line, and they're also called the National Tag Titles once again. As Bob says, they're going to jack a few jaws to win the $20,000 and take home the titles.
Yeah, at this point, I had never seen Bob Armstrong, and I really enjoyed him.
Oh, what a great personality. What a character, right? So Road Dogg got the character. Brad Armstrong was a far better wrestler than Bob ever was, but Brad still picked up a lot of that psychology and the good wrestling and whatnot from Bob. And of course, Road Dogg got the personality traits. If only either one of those guys had gotten both things, my God, it was sky's the limit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's all Brad needed was the personality.
Yes.
And I met him a few times. He had the personality. It just didn't come out on screen.
I've always heard that about him and Dean Malenko.
I've never met Malenko, but it's hard to believe Malenko actually had a personality of any kind.
Well, I'll tell you what, we got Brad and Bob Armstrong in the territory. We got more teams coming later in this episode. We also hear from Freddie Miller running down all of the teams involved in the big Omni event, but it changes so drastically, Jamie, there's no point in me addressing it here yet, as I believe half the teams will actually change from the time they announce them to the actual date we get to the tournament. So we'll address that on a later episode, by the way. Right now we go off to an interview with Mr. Wrestling 2, who has a whole new reason to be grumpy because his tag team partner on Thanksgiving night is supposedly not Steve-O, not somebody he's teamed with pretty damn often here, but instead Tony frickin' Gurria. Talk about having a reason to be grumpy. I'm not a Gurria fan, as a lot of people know, but spoiler alert, Gurria will be replaced by Rick Martel at the end of the day, so all is okay.
You know what, though? You just hit on it. Let's pick on Ole again. Why wouldn't you have the Steve-O and Wrestling 2 together as a team here? Going back to March, nobody's won more matches on house show or TV than the team of Mr. Wrestling 2 and Mr. Personality, Kung Fu the Dragon Steve-O.
Yeah, very odd that you wouldn't bring Gurria and Martel in as the team, instead trying to give them both partners. And I don't want to dissect all this right here, right now, but Martel actually going to be announced as Tommy Rich's partner coming in, which would have been awesome. And then, of course, Gurria was supposed to be Wrestling 2's partner. Gurria doesn't come in at all, so Tommy Rich goes and does something different, and then we get Rick Martel teaming with Wrestling 2. But it's a lot of weird WWF dynamic because at this point they're announcing Pat Patterson, who was still with Vince at that point, Vince Sr., and of course Gurria and Martel, and I'm not sure, Fuji and Saito, I'm not sure if they're in the WWF back in 81 yet or not again, but just a lot of New York style talent supposedly booked for this Omni show.
Once a year, you usually had an influx of WWF guys.
All at the same time?
Hitting the Omni. I mean, you're going to have it again, July 4th, 82. They're going to come in for, that big card. Go back into 1980. There was a show that had a Backlund on it with several WWF guys. They did it in December of 79. So it's like once a year, they send the guys down to the Omni.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to go on, guys. We got a lot left to get into here, Jamie. We get a quick interview here with Terry Gordy, who says he's been holding back, believe it or not, but he's fixing to bust loose. That's a scary thought. If Terry Gordy's been holding back, we'll have to see what he does here. In the ring, taking on Jim Gallagher is Terry Gordy. Nasty waistlock takedowns, does it repeatedly, almost like suplexes, but they're just takedowns. Then grinding his palm in Gallagher's face, just riding him around the mat. Finally, just a big right hand. And we saw Gordy do that once before. Actually, the camera didn't catch it, but Gordon told us so. Gordy with the right hand and makes the cover. But then he stops and locks in is that the Dragon Sleeper? Gordon Solie calling it a reverse headlock as he has the man upside down, but I'll be damned if Terry Gordy hasn't locked in the Dragon Sleeper as Scrappy McGowan calls for the bell. Match goes 3 minutes and 50 seconds.
Yeah. Hey, you just mentioned Scrappy McGowan.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me, back on the October 24th episode, we finally said goodbye to George Scott Jr.
Oh, is that when he departed us? Okay.
I believe that was his last show. Now we just have Scrappy and Nick Patrick for a little while.
Kind of interesting, too, because this is where the influx begins. Roddy Piper, Austin Idol, Stan Hansen, all these new talents. We see the Armstrongs here. And some of the people leaving includes a referee in George Scott Jr., Byron Scott, as he'll be called in the NWA 1989. Speaking of referees, as the refs have issues getting Gordy to leave the ring here, he wants to continue doing damage to poor Gallagher. Michael Hayes is going to make his way out for a promo. They don't really seem to have the heat that they did before, do Gordy and Hayes with each other. Not really You remember before, Hayes would have just ran in and attacked Gordy, but he seems to be happy after those baby bottle matches. But Hayes still pointing at Gordy to, you better leave the ring. Terry Gordy slowly does so.
And then gives Michael a little look. These guys had to be in Always Doghouse.
So Michael, yeah, you're telling me. So Michael Hayes is coming out for an interview, but as he's walking out, we can hear the familiar voice of one Austin Idol, darlin. Austin Idol over there talking with Gordon Solie as Michael Hayes makes his way over. So both guys out here again this week at the same time. Idol says that Terry Gordy may not be as handsome as Austin is. He may not be as sexy as Idol is, but he's as tough as they come. So Austin Idol siding with Terry Gordy in that former Freebirds feud. Michael Hayes then going to stop by for his own interview, warning Idol that Hotlanta ain't big enough for the both of them. So if Austin's feeling froggy, he can leap. But this gets fun again as Idol plays it off, just poses for the camera and walks away. Again, I wrote, it's so weird, Austin Idol acting like Michael Hayes is not even, they're both in the same physical area. They clearly don't get along, but there's some sort of weird mutual thing to where they both do their own things, and Austin Idol just in his own world. It's like Michael Hayes not really there, in a different dimension.
Well, from a lot that I've heard, Idol's that way all the time.
Well, it certainly comes off that way, at least in what I've heard anyway. But yeah, it's a good time there. Just talk about a dream match. Maybe not so much as far as wrestling goes. Neither guy known as being the greatest wrestler of all time, especially Michael Hayes. But to have those two in the ring at the same time, or just those promos we could have got. We dreamed about those at the end of October 1980 before Austin left, and now we kind of get the tease. It's a year later, right? Full circle. A year later, we could see these two go at it again.
Damn Robert Fuller.
Oh, the Tennessee stud. Well, the other stud. After Ron Fuller retired, of course.
Well, we're about to get Ron in a little while, too, but that's another story. We'll get there down the line.
So much talent to get into, but right now it's back to the ring for Ted Oates out here again, taking on Don Williams this week. Oates using that kip up again for absolutely no reason, but he does it anyway. It's fun to learn new things, Jamie. But you know what? Coming off, Gordon talked about it, the knee surgery. Very impressive to see Ted Oates out here busting out kip ups week after week.
This week of Ted Oates, last week I said he looked like Matt Bourne. This week I thought he looked like a mini Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Wow, he's changing looks by the week here, according to Jamie. You guys got to go check these.
He could have probably gone down to Mexico and worked as a Mexican mini.
Wow. It's not that short, is he? I don't know. But I do know that he's having trouble here with Don Williams, whoever that is, as Williams comes back with a freaking trapezius nerve hold. Roddy Piper says, I hate that hold because it doesn't give you enough control. It doesn't control a limb on the body, says the Hot Rod, when you're just locked into the trapezius area. So even Roddy Piper, not a fan of that move. I don't think anybody is.
As my wife would say, truth.
Truth. I love it. Spinning toe hold eventually going to do Williams in. Ted Oates going over 5 minutes and 8 seconds. And then sound the alarm. We are alerted that the Stanley Works bout of the month is coming all the way into December 5th. The fans need to pick a winner, send it in on a postcard. Will it be Steve-O or Brian St. John? That's supposed to make us tune in. Mail in your postcard, guys. Winner will receive a garage door opener. Loser receives a toolkit. Wow. They are promoting something a month and a half in advance. A month in advance. Fans pick the winner. You got to have time to send in your postcards, of course. There's no email. There's no internet back then. Steve-O versus Brian St. John is the hill they're dying on with this thing. This is going to make people tune in.
Yes, everybody will. Well, Steve-O alone, they'll tune in for. But let's stay tuned and see how that match happens.
Where was Dave Meltzer in 1981 to break down the quarterly ratings? I want to know what that match drew as we continue on. Austin Idol taking on Rick Benefield. Bell sounds before Idol is even into the studio, guys. Referee begins counting Austin out as he slowly enters the ring. 90 seconds into the match, and Idol finally going to tie up, landing the diving elbow and the Las Vegas leg lock for the win. 2 minutes and 26 seconds, of which we got about 45 minutes of action.
He's just so entertaining, though. You can put up with the lack of action.
Yeah, and I said 45 minutes. I don't want to freak anyone out. Of course, 45 seconds. I don't see Idol going 45 minutes with anyone, especially Rick Benefield. As we continue on, Ray the Crippler Stevens out here. He seems hyped up, really hyped, Jamie, as you mentioned. With Pat Patterson's coming to town. They're going to reunite to show everyone the greatest tag team in wrestling history.
I believe they even were in Georgia years ago, weren't they?
Yeah, and I think they did a little bit in the AWA as well, but I'll tell you what here, Ray Stevens, the way he's selling this, I believe he truly believes Pat's on its way to Georgia.
And he probably was at this point.
I have no doubt that. I don't think they would have randomly announced it had he not been. I hate to know, I would like to know what fell through there. I doubt anybody would remember that would be involved that's still around. So we'll continue on. We get a quick interview from Tommy Rich promoting upcoming matches. Of course, the tag team title tournament right now. Rich's scheduled partner for that is Rick Martel, and I believe they were a former tag team at one time.
Yes, they were. They were Georgia Tag Team Champions.
Right now, though, Tommy Rich has a different partner as he heads off to the ring to team with Mr. Wrestling number 2, taking on Iron Mike Sharp and Ricky Harris, the future Black Bart. So I'm sure that's a fun team for you, Black Bart and Mike Sharp. Quick tags by the baby faces and the capable heels. They really don't get a chance for much offense here. Finally, the Super Destroyer walking by ringside, which psychs Rich out long enough, or as Gordon calls it, his concentration train was completely broken. Oh, Gordon, where do you come up with this stuff? Concentration train.
Hey, if Gordon says it, it's true.
I don't know what it means, but I'll take it.
Gordon does that. It's all that matters.
Tommy Rich psyched out, Super Destroyer walking by ringside. So Tommy actually going to leave the ring to go after the Masked Man, but Wrestling 2, getting Rich focused back on the match in the ring. Super D, though, eventually returning to ringside, and this time Tommy Rich grabs him and pitches him into the ring as Tommy Rich attacks the Masked Man, not Wrestling 2, but Super Destroyer. Surprised at this point Tommy isn't calling Wrestling 2 the Superstar. Just paranoia running wild here. But Ricky Harris and Mike Sharp joining in on the fight with Super D. They're all going to try to attack Tommy Rich as the Masked Man escapes. Very smart here. So Super D thrown in the ring, Tommy Rich attacking him. The other heels, Ricky Harris and Mike Sharp, joining in, and Super D doing the old cartoon routine again this week. Last week it was turning around. Hey, you fooled me. This week it's crawling out of the dog pile that's going on in the ring, where everybody gets into the big fight. We see the big cloud of smoke, and then somebody escapes. That was Super D here.
Yeah. To add credibility to the angle, I don't know if you caught it, but I did. Several times while Super D is out there, Piper misspeaks and calls him Superstar and then quickly corrects himself. That's a greatness of Roddy Piper.
It is. It's very sly of Roddy Piper. Well, I might have picked up on it and not put it in my notes. It's been a few weeks since I took these, but no, it's very cool that he's playing it in as hard as he can here. As a referee, Scrappy McGowan calling for the bell. This one just breaking down. I think the match was just thrown out. Match goes 5 minutes and 14 seconds. As we close out hour number 1, we hear from Roddy Piper, but he's not breaking things down this week. Instead, he's going to conduct an interview, Roddy's very first interview with a wrestler here on Georgia TV. And the man he's going to be interviewing, one Ole Anderson.
One half of the World Tag Team Championship, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole and Gene Anderson. Moving in now,
if I may, Mr. Solie, may I speak with this man? Because this man here is a man after my own heart. Right here is half the world's tag team champion, Mr. Ole Anderson, and it's a pleasure to stand up here with you because we are on the same psychological advantage. I know your system. I know you like to hear bones crunch. I know you stay with the same hold. You see, I noticed a lot of these wrestlers here lack aggression. That's something that you don't at all, right?
Well, everybody wants to be the best, and certainly they're talking about tag teams coming into the area now because there has to be a particularly great prize. This trophy, money, would make anybody come down because competition was all about. And the best one is going to come out on top, and when they do, they're going to be a little bit richer. Well, in order to be the best, I've always told people, in order to be the best, you've got to go out there and be the worst. You've got to go out there and grab a hold of arms. You've got to twist them. You've got to turn them. And you've got to listen to those muscles and those bones start to crack.
That's
you know what I'm talking about?
I've been telling him. Just exactly what I've been telling him. And you have that aggression. What I was saying, like with Bob Armstrong and his son, he doesn't let his son in there and sacrifice. They don't know what sacrifice is, do they?
Well, I'll tell you what. I've made the supreme sacrifice. I've said it many times. If it comes to sacrificing Gene or myself, that's exactly what we'll do. The important thing is to win.
It's been a pleasure, Mr. Anderson.
And that's all the time we have for this hour of Georgia Championship Wrestling. By all means, stay tuned. We'll be back in just 5 minutes. But right now, let's turn it over to Bob Neal and the football scoreboard.
So Ole says in order to be the best, you got to be the worst. Ole the worst, the most devious man in the world of professional wrestling, Jamie. They stand there with the trophy promoting the upcoming tag tournament. Ole's partner going to be Gene Anderson at this point. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of this over the next several weeks, a lot of this tag team build for this tournament.
Oh, yeah, we're going to see a who's who. And remember, coming up in the next hour, we're going to see one of those who's who of teams. But what a great interview by Ole, conducted by Roddy Piper. And these two are going to have a kinsmanship for the next year. It's going to be a true brothership love affair between these two guys.
Sure it is. Yeah, they left on great terms as well. As we head into hour number 2, it's another tag team coming into the territory for that big tournament coming up. It's the Sheepherders. And I'm talking about Crazy Luke Williams and Jonathan Boyd, that version of the Sheeps, as I do believe this was during the period where Butch, Brute Miller, went back a little homesick, reportedly, after his time in Portland, and Butch going to go back to New Zealand for some time here, and it's going to be Luke and Jonathan Boyd here as the Sheepherders taking on Ted Oates and Don Gilbert. And it's so funny seeing Luke in there when he was really mobile, right? Jumping off the ropes, taking crazy bumps for Ted Oates here. And then Gilbert tags back in as the Sheeps take over. Some switching in and out without a legal tag, which is totally heel-rific with me. Long beatdown going to follow from the New Zealand team. Somehow Ted Oates, though, tagging back in and explodes on Jonathan Boyd. Big backdrop, slams for both of the herders, but then Ted stupidly tagging back to Don Gilbert, who is immediately dropped, as we see the familiar Bushwhacker battering ram from both men, and then the double gutbuster. Going to end at 5 minutes and 40 seconds. I didn't realize they were doing both of those moves all the way back in 81.
Yeah, even though they were the Sheepherders and not the Bushwhackers here, still, it didn't matter very much whether it was Boyd or Miller in there. They were just a fantastic team. And even Piper acknowledges he has past history with these guys in the match.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of great stuff. Go check that stuff out. 1980 Portland, Roddy Piper on both sides of the ring with the Sheepherders. Of course, they're heels. They're with Buddy Rose early on. And then later, they're going to have their heads shaved. So that's when Luke and Butch lose their hair back in 1980 in Portland. And so by the time Luke gets here, his head's been shaved. But so fun to see them here. And it was a fun match, but the crowd really making things hot today. Really great crowd they have here in the studio. The sports arena here in Georgia this week. At this point, you know, we talked about it a lot. I'm sure people are getting tired of hearing us mention it here over the last hour of TV. But even Gordon Solie realizing how much they've been shilling the tag team tournament that he has to apologize for all the hype work here. But he says they're just so damn excited or something like that anyway.
Yeah, because Gordon would never curse.
Well, of course not. Well, not on camera anyway. As Freebird begins to play, out comes Michael Hayes to take on Ed Timms. And as you suspect, not a whole lot on this one. Hayes dominating. And when Timms throws some shots, Hayes fires back with some drilling rights of his own. Hayes, though, runs out of moves, so he has to begin using them twice. Swinging neckbreaker for the second time, but lots of chin locks in between from the former Freebird. Tim's going to manage to reverse a whip in the corner, but charges right into a knee from Michael Hayes, who then lands a running bulldog. As Hayes makes the cover, though, he is attacked, drawing a outside interference disqualification. Match goes 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
It was Michael Hayes at his best.
Well, if that was
as an in-ring performer.
Oh wow, that's a scary thought. It wasn't exactly the prettiest of matches. It wasn't bad. It was all right. It was there. Michael Hayes lands his finisher most of the time anyway, that running bulldog, but he's attacked. Attacked by who? Good question, guys. We see a guy in a full bodysuit, black and yellow mask, attack Hayes in the ring. The camera also catches Terry Gordy now at ringside, egging the masked man on. And as the masked man slams Hayes down, he delivers a diving elbow drop from the middle rope. Hey, I saw that move done here earlier in hour number 1. The masked man then heads back up a second time, goes for a second diving elbow, but this time Michael Hayes out of the way, and the masked man misses. Hayes up now, ripping the mask off the hooded fellow, trying to remove the mask and expose whoever that is, Jamie. as this seems like it's taking a little longer than they expected, as the mask is on there pretty good, it would appear. The Masked Man, though, you would think, I guess, the Masked Man has a big head, darlin. Finally, Michael Hayes ripping the mask off, and it reveals, well, I'll be damned, it was Austin Idol under the hood.
A year in the making. It's about time the two finally touched.
Revenge, guys, is a bet. Well, Austin Idol's a heel. I don't know if they want to sell it as revenge. As now, after a couple minutes of fighting back and forth, Michael Hayes, Austin Idol, and watching the unmasking on the floor, Terry Gordy just now decides, well, I'm going to jump in there too, Michael. So in comes Terry Gordy to help out Austin Idol. Idol trying for the Las Vegas leg lock, but Michael Hayes escapes. And Terry Gordy going to lower the boom from behind. The heels then double teaming Hayes, dumping job guys and referees in the process, trying to make the save to no avail as we go off to a break in an attempt to restore some order. So Terry Gordy, I thought he was done with Michael Hayes, but maybe not completely here as he brings in Austin Idol, a former foe and apparently still a foe of one Michael. He's been interrupting his interviews, and now Austin Idol in there under a hood, but we learn it was the universal heartthrob all along.
I really wish Ole would have put more power behind this feud. They could have gone a couple more months with this.
Oh, absolutely. There was so much that could have been done there between those two. You could have just gave them a microphone and told them to go, and they would have figured it out on their own.
Did you happen to notice that the mask that Austin Idol was wearing was the same mask that he wears in that angle with Jerry Lawler, where he was like the Mexican champion wrestler?
Yes, yeah.
And he comes to present Lawler an
with
award.
a plaque, right? Yes.
Yeah, it's the same exact mask.
Oh, well, see, they say the old rule of thumb was you always carry a mask with you in your gear bag. So I guess that was Austin Idol's mask. Only had to use it twice, darling.
And he was prepared.
He was prepared here for Georgia TV, that's for sure. And we go off now to a promo from Ivan Koloff. And after Gordon Solie called the belt that he was wearing earlier one half of the European tag team titles, Uncle Ivan straight up makes it clear that this is the NWA TV title. He is the champion of the viewers, the champion of TV, and he will wrestle any kind of match while back here in Georgia. So Koloff contradicting what Gordon was telling us earlier in the singles matchup.
Well, Ivan has spent years and years working with Gordon off and on. So he knows exactly what's going to happen during the interview. So he was prepared to straighten Gordon out.
I love it. So
subtly, he didn't embarrass Gordon.
No,
he just kind of, I am the NWA World TV Champion.
Yes, yeah. And he's kind of alluding that he would defend it here if he had a challenger in place. But right now, Ivan back in the ring tag team action this time, teaming with Super Destroyer, taking on Rick Benefield and George Wells. Good to see him back on TV. Surprisingly,
Poor
Wells,
George.
He's grounded early and doesn't get a whole lot of offense in here. He's kind of treated like a jobber, I hate to say it. After seeing him explode so many months ago in some great matches, George Wells not getting a whole lot in, getting nothing in really here. Benefield has even less success, though. Super D, especially snug in the ring, lands that hooking clothesline and the Cobra hold. Going to get the submission win. 4 minutes and 8 seconds. Roddy Piper, of course, pointing out that's the same move used by the superstar, the Cobra hold.
It really aggravates me, this whole George Wells push. I know we're talking about Super D here, but I just got to go back. Him and Butch Reed were off to such a hot start.
Yeah.
And they just abandoned Wells. It just, I understand Reed left.
He was doing some really impressive stuff on his own. I mean, he would have, yeah.
He could have been pushed, really hard, and he would have gotten over in Atlanta.
Yeah, it would have worked in this point. People were ready for it. They were waiting for it. They were kind of, and he got some good response, too, in some of those TV matches. Unfortunately, Ole and even George Scott really wasn't doing a whole. He could have done more with him himself, but Ole comes in, and it's just a no-go here. And even worse, the fact that Wells is in here and, basically getting beaten down. He's not even really getting any offense. At least he didn't do the job. But at the same time, he does try to come in to save his partner at the end, and Ivan Koloff just mauling down Wells. And usually you didn't see that from the stronger guy on the team after the match.
Right, so maybe Ole told him to finish him off so I can get rid of this guy.
Well, George is about out of town, so that would make sense. We get a couple more interviews here from Ray Stevens talking about the Thanksgiving night in the Omni, once again selling his tag team with Pat Patterson, and then Wrestling 2 talking about his team with Tony Gurria. 2 also talking about other matches in various towns upcoming. As we go back to the ring to see from Havana, Cuba. It is indeed El Gran Apollo. I believe this would be his Georgia debut, if I'm not mistaken. Gran Apollo taking on Don Williams, as Freddie Miller going to join commentary to announce that Michael Hayes is indeed hurt in the backstage area after that attack. He is currently receiving medical attention, Jamie, and Freddie thought that was just uncalled for, what those heels did to Michael. You tell him, Freddie.
Freddie doesn't get a lot of airtime, but when Freddie does, it's impactful.
That was just uncalled for, Gordon. I can't believe it. Poor Freddie Miller, probably as upset as Michael Hayes is right now. As the action in the ring, Gran Apollo moving fast, looking good, flying forearm and a drop kick right on the money here. He makes the cover, but Nick Patrick, the referee, notices Williams has his shoulder up, so is Nick actually going to stop counting, even though that looked like the finish. Apollo has to cover a second time to score the win. Match goes 2 minutes and 51 seconds.
I liked Apollo. I mean, he's not Steve-O level, but I was behind him solidly.
I've seen him in doses. I have to say, this was really impressive. I really enjoyed him here. Of course, most of the stuff he did was in Florida. But just recently, and I wish I could remember who I heard it from. It came from a couple of sources that would have known him, been in the ring with him, or at least been in the locker room with him. And they said, his biggest issue was his ego. I guess a lot of people did not like him based on the way he walked around, the things he said to people. He just rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and he didn't last very long in the business.
Oh, I was just about to say, I guess that's why he didn't last too long.
Yeah,
but he was impressed. He was impressive down in Florida. I got to see him a little bit down there before he came to Georgia. But I enjoyed his short little run here in Georgia.
No, yeah, absolutely. Well, we get another couple of interviews here. They continue to hard sell that upcoming tag tournament. Ole Anderson out here again. He says everybody wants to be a wrestler. They think it's just that easy. Well, watch his next match here in just a few minutes, and then you decide if you have what it takes. That's a scary thought for whoever's opponent is listening to Ole cut that promo. And then you're like, oh, shit, and I got to work him. So Ole going to show everybody that wrestling is real, and you do not want to be in there with an Anderson. But before we get to the matchup, we also hear from the Sheepherders briefly. Jonathan Boyd doing what I've wondered for so many years, explaining what a sheepherder is, Jamie. And yes, guys, I know what a sheepherder does, but in wrestling retrospect, what would a sheepherder be? Why would I be intimidated by a sheepherder? Well, he says a sheepherder, they own a lot of sheep, and that brings them a lot of money, which allows them to fly around the world and dominate other countries. So that didn't really explain to me what a sheepherder is or why they wrestle, but at least he gave him an explanation.
Yes, he did, and he guaranteed that the New Zealand flag would be hanging up in every arena in the country very soon.
Well, every studio arena anyway, as we go to the ring. Poor Jim Gallagher drawing the short straw to take on Ole Anderson, who is as aggressive as always here. Complete mauling on poor Gallagher. Ole's promo definitely matches his in-ring personality, I have to say. Ole with a banana split gets the pin, but only after Nick Patrick would again accept that Gallagher's shoulders were both on the mat. What a stretch this banana split was. Ole picking up the win, 5 minutes and 32 seconds. And Nick Patrick, he must have gotten yelled at recently for counting a 3 when it clearly wasn't, because he's being ultra careful this week in meaningless matches.
He's doing what he's told to do. And I totally believe that. He probably did mess up something somewhere. So he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice, especially
not with the booker in the ring.
Exactly. And Daddy's probably nowhere around, so you don't have Daddy to protect him.
Well, there's a lot more promos, very heavy on the promos lately, and it's because instead of one in between the matches, we're getting a lot of 2-offs. So the interviews aren't going super long, so not a lot of context behind them. But we do hear from the Armstrongs again. Bullet Bob says it's not the size of the man in the fight, but the size of the fight in the man, brother. You better believe it when the Bullet's in the ring. And Brad Armstrong, not too shabby either. I've said it on many occasions. I won't say one of my top 5 overall total package in the ring talents, but Brad Armstrong, easily one of my top 5 favorites to watch wrestle.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And Bob might be one of my top favorites to listen to.
Oh, yeah.
I instantly became a Bob Armstrong fan on November 7th, 1981.
Very good. As we also hear from the wildfire Tommy Rich, who can't wait for Rick Martel's return. Neither can I, as his old partner going to be coming back to tag team up for the big tournament Then it's back to the ring to see the Armstrongs one more time. Closing out the show, the final match, going to see Bob and Brad Armstrong take on Ricky Harris and Jose Medina. And Brad looking good in there, but Bob is just so smooth in everything he does. The heel side going to briefly take over on the Bullet, but Bob fires back with some awesome right hands to Harris, and it wakes everyone up because we're just watching a squash match, and Bob lays in some shots that look so real, it just kind of wakes the crowd up. They take notice, and that's just a punch, guys, so you young wrestlers out there, you take notice.
Piper on commentary in this match, actually, if you listen closely, actually gets sucked in a little bit, kind of cheering for Medina when he makes his little, not comeback, but aggressive moment. So again, setting up something for the future.
Definitely, the seeds are being planted very subtly by the Hot Rod at this point in time as Brad Armstrong tagged back in, lands a nice drop kick, but soon baby boy Armstrong finds himself in the wrong corner and the heel's going to hammer away. Brad, though, able to stagger over and make the hot tag back to Bullet Bob, leading to a four-way melee. Bob coming off the middle rope with a standing elbow knocks Medina out cold as the Bullet picks up the win, 6 minutes and 16 seconds.
Only appropriate for the funky cold Medina.
Well, it was unfortunate earlier, as we heard from Freddie Miller, Michael Hayes injured at the hands of Terry Gordy and Austin Idol, so what better way to close the show than to hear from the heels? Idol and Gordy out here. Gordy says he's getting sick and tired of people trying to run him off. You don't see Michael Hayes out here no more, do you, Jamie? Idol pointing out that Hayes commented earlier that he'd take on Austin anytime. Well, put your money where your mouth is, Jack. Idol name drops a series of huge stars and says if any of them put his name in their mouth, they better be ready for the universal heartthrob, darling. Anywhere, anytime. It'll happen when Austin wants.
Yeah, a great interview from Austin out here because he actually mentioned some heels in this interview also.
Yeah, Austin Idol taking no prisoners. He's going to come for anybody who's coming for him, anybody who stands in his way. And that could be a fun team, Terry Gordy and Austin Idol moving. It's kind of like a replacement for Michael Hayes, at least for the short term for Terry Gordy. He's went through a few partners here, Jimmy Snuka, Jim Duggan, now maybe Austin Idol.
And a great team they will make if they can last.
If it lasts for certain, but just a lot of probabilities.
Again, Ole has to allow it to last.
That's really the big point here is Ole's booking and what he's going to allow and not allow with all the talent he has right now. It's amazing when you run down the list of talent here in the Georgia territory. And all the Armstrongs add to it all. I don't want to see them get lost in the shuffle with all these big guys, like physically big guys like a Stan Hansen coming in or a jacked up Austin Idol. Bullet Bob, a big name, and then Brad, he's young and he's green, but he's growing every day as far as his wrestling ability, and it's great to see all these guys out there. And hey, Roddy Piper hasn't even gotten in the ring yet, hasn't even laced up his boots here in Georgia, so it's going to be fun times ahead as we conclude this week. Jamie, another fun 2-hour edition of the show. I've had a blast, man. We've seen everybody from Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair in week 1 here. Into week 2, we get to see Austin Idol under the hood. And is Super D Superstar? Well, I don't know what they're going to come up with as the weeks come, but the Sheepherders here, the Armstrongs are here. It just keeps getting better and better. And hey, let's not forget Rod Piper.
Rod Piper. Yeah, it doesn't get any better than the rowdy one himself. And this point here just takes my fandom, and I've said this several times, to the next level. I've said from the first time when we did the pre-show, setting the stage, how much I was a Michael Hayes guy. Michael Hayes is my number 2 of all time. Number 1 is Roddy Piper. And this is where I jump on that bandwagon and I'll ride it right to the end with Piper.
Oh, man, you should be on cloud 9 for a while here, at least as long as Hayes sticks around with Roddy Piper and Hayes both in the same territory at the same time. I was always a huge Roddy Piper mark, though I feared him when he was a heel. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I said there were a lot of bigger guys in the WWF, a Bundy, a Stud, but Roddy Piper, he just seemed vicious, violent. He seemed real when he cut those heel promos. That's why he got the heat that he got. And he's not there yet in Georgia because he's kind of playing the analyst role. But yeah, Roddy Piper's great. I was a huge Austin Idol mark growing up as well. So it's a fun time for me too, going back and seeing the talent here, Armstrong mark. So Georgia's doing really well right now. As we wrap things up, can't wait to see where we go next, guys. You see the talent that's here, so it's going to be a fun time. And hey, Rod Piper's always going to have something to say. We all know that by now. So it's going to be a good time again next time around. But Jamie, want to thank you once again for doing this show. 2 hours in the books. I know you got a lot going on, brother, and we'll do this again very soon. As you close up shop, I'll let you say your goodbyes.
Really appreciate you having me back, Ray. It's been a while. I've had some personal issues going on. I'll just go ahead and say my mother-in-law has recently been sick, and after a good battle the last couple of months, just recently passed away. So it's been a very strenuous week in the Ward household recently. But life goes on. I've lost both my parents, and now both my in-laws are gone. So it's time to, as my father told me, don't look back, just look forward. And, if you do look back, just remember the good times.
Absolutely. I have to do the same thing myself with a lot of my family at this point. And, very sorry. I give you my condolences offline, but we'll say it again here on air. Jammie, condolences to the entire Ward family. You're of course, your wife's family. And, very sorry to hear that. Just appreciate you taking the time out here, though, to squeeze a show in between everything you have going on, personal, business, et cetera, et cetera. And hoping to do another one really soon, as we're now in the month of November, coming to a close in 81 very soon, but so much more to get into before we get there. Jammie, you got any shout-outs before we close up?
Yeah, before we go, bring up that WrestleCopia's own The Other Ship podcast. I'll be returning to the airwaves probably the same time that this one makes the air. We're real close, and we'll be reviewing WWE's Bad Blood pay-per-view. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the preview show for that because of the way things were going on, but I'll be back for that, and I'll be on a lot of their upcoming shows between now and December, because the current product, WWE, is going to have a lot of stuff going on. So when those guys talk wrestling, I'm on. When they don't talk wrestling, they talk a lot of music.
All kinds of stuff,
they've had the group, the Josephines, on lately. Barry Rose, who everyone knows, and Harold Stressler were recently on, speaking of a whole episode about the Cars.
Yeah, they talked about, there was some fun conversations recently. If you guys are into music, they put together some of their favorite metal hair bands of the 80s, some of their favorite songs. They do deep cuts too, and they talk about stuff. They did some mixtape type shows and stuff and whatnot. So they've been really heavy on the music lately, but they're heading back into a lot of wrestling, as you said, because there's a lot of WWE wrestling coming up, pay-per-views, PLEs, if you will. But also, I just spoke with those guys earlier today, and the Crockett, they're doing like a super duper Crockett Cup from the different decades. So we're going to kind of break down all of the different tag teams from the decades and find out who the true winner is of the entire world of professional wrestling as far as tag team goes. They're going to do some of that on their show in coming weeks as well. So looking forward to all of that and so much more, part of The Other Ship, as we wrap things up here this week. It's going to be a good time, guys. We've got all the great shows here. Bob Roop, the Outdated Wrestling Hour now with Bob Smith, Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert, and the list goes on and on. So we're going to wrap it up right now. Appreciate all of you. We'll be back soon with more Georgia. It's been too long, Jammie. So happy to get this in. And we're not going to wait as long next time. I'm hoping we can knock another one out very soon. And we'll talk a little more next time around, see what all these guys are doing throughout the month of November.
Absolutely, Ray. When you need me, just call.
All right, guys, that'll do it here this week, but we shall return for more Georgia 81, Memphis 85, and UWF 86 very soon. I'm your host, Ray Russell. You can follow me on X at Rasslin Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Rasslin Grenade. And don't forget that $5 all-access tier over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. And until next time, we'll be back soon with more Regional Rasslin, where we talk the territories.